This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning. We'll be getting started here in just a minute. If you have called in on a cell phone or something like that, identify yourselves so we can get you labeled on the screen here. That would be helpful.
This is Chelsea Reed on a cell phone.
Grab that one. Okay, thank you. Huh? Or, yes.
I know. Oh, I know.
And for everybody, in case you haven't seen it, excuse me, on the screen there, if you could mute yourselves until it's time for you to talk, we would appreciate that. That'll help the meeting run well. When we do the roll call, I'll be doing it by county for the Treasure Coast folks. So I'll announce the county name, and so that'd be a good time to unmute yourself and get ready, and then mute yourself back again so we can avoid any those painful sound loops that torture us sometimes. 10:02. So I think if you want to get underway. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Hamara, and I'm the chairman of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. I call to order this joint workshop of the South Florida and Treasure Coast Regional Planning Councils this morning, March 19th, 2021. It is a little after 10 o'clock in the morning, and I want to welcome everyone. Just to remind you all, please mute your microphones when you are not speaking. And we will begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me.
Flag will fall up here just a moment.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is roll call. Mr. Lanahan.
Thank you. So as I stated previously, we'll be going by county. So first up is Indian River County. Commissioner Peter O'Brien. Commissioner Joe Ehrman. Commissioner Susan Adams.
I'm right.
Here.
Joe Ehrman is here. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Laura Moss.
Here.
Mayor Ed Dodd. Councilmember Honey Manous. Mayor Brian Foley.
Here.
Councilmember Patty Manous. Okay, next is St. Lucie County. Commissioner Kathy Townsend.
Here, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Franny Hutchinson. Commissioner Sean Mitchell.
I'm here. Good morning.
Commissioner Chris Sadowski. Mayor Greg Orovec. Councilman David Pickett. Commissioner Curtis Johnson.
I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Thomas Perona. And next we have Martin County, Commissioner Doug Smith. Commissioner Harold Jenkins. Commissioner Stacy Hetherington. Commissioner Ed Campy. Mayor Eula Clark. Vice Mayor James Campo. Palm Beach County, Commissioner Maria Marino.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Melissa McKinley. Commissioner Mac Bernard. Vice Mayor Robert Weinroth.
Present.
Morning. Commissioner Greg Weiss.
Here.
He was, let the record show, Commissioner Weiss was our first attendee this morning. Mayor Dave Kerman. Mayor Ann Gerwig.
Here.
Commissioner Joe Peduzzi. Vice Mayor Jeff Hamera. Here. Commissioner Regina Boland. Vice Mayor Mark Gottlieb.
Here.
Mayor Christine DeHassett.
Present.
Mayor Abby Brennan.
Here.
Morning. Commissioner John Linden.
Hey, I'm here, and ignore the bolt-on technology below my name. I got to change it.
Okay. President Pro Tem David Norris. Councilmember Chelsea Reed. She's here. Editorial appointees. Reed.
Here.
Michael Houston.
The hope is that now at the end of the month, when there's no more,
Mark Lanham. Reese Parrish.
Here.
Morning. Ex officios, Lois Bush, FDOT.
Here.
Kathy LaMartina, South Florida Water Management District. Jason Andriotta, FDEP. Rain Cargill, SFRTA. Okay, that is the, did I miss anyone in the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council group whose name I didn't call?
It's Michael Davis. I'm here. I don't know what happened. I didn't get unmuted in time.
Okay, got you. Thank you. All right, that's the Treasure Coast roll call.
Good morning, everyone. For the South Florida Regional Planning Council, Michelle Coldiron is excused. Joseph Corradino is excused. Bean Burr is excused. Commissioner Renee Garcia, Miami-Dade County. Mayor Steve Geller.
Here.
Vice Chair Oliver Gilbert. Governor's appointee Carrie Goldberg.
Here.
Commissioner Sam Kaufman. He's here. Thank you. Councilmember Leonard.
Present.
Thank you. Monroe County Commissioner Eddie Martinez. I see any hands? Okay. All right. County Commissioner Jean Monestein, Miami-Dade County. Mayor Cooper City, Greg Ross.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Broward County, Michael Udine.
Here.
Mayor of North Lauderdale, Anna Ziadi. I don't know if she's there, but no. Chair Bailey.
Present.
Our ex officios, Jason Andriotta, Department of Environmental Protection is excused. Laura Corey, South Florida Water Management District.
Here.
Dat Wynn, Florida Department of Transportation, District 6.
Morning. Here.
Oh, great. Thank you. And that concludes our roll call.
Back Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And moving on quickly to our opening comments. I would like to again welcome everybody, all of the members of the councils, as well as our special guests, the speakers who are going to present today. This is a continuation of our navigation of the COVID-19 experience that we are going through. Gives us an opportunity to demonstrate some innovation and a determination to continue to work on these important matters of regional interest. When you look at the agenda this morning, hopefully you'll see what I see, which is an extraordinary opportunity to actually get some history and background in some particularly important programs such as SERP. And also, I'm looking forward to not only the presentations, but also the discussions this morning. Once again, even though our methods of addressing these important issues have changed by necessity, their urgency and importance hasn't changed any. And I think it's a credit to all of us, and especially to our staffs, for putting together the means to allow us to continue to address these issues. So once again, I welcome everybody. I look forward to a very productive workshop this morning. And I'm going to turn it over to my counterpart, Chair Mario Bailey. Mr. Bailey, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you today on I think a very important meeting. We have a very robust agenda, so I won't go very long. But I think it's very important that we convene because the issues, they do not stop at county lines. Development, COVID, it goes beyond. And so it's very important that we come together and convene and work together about coming up with great solutions. I want to start off by, I guess, some solemn news. We're definitely going to miss Ms. Laura Corey. She's retiring, she's leaving us. She has been with the South Florida Regional Planning Council for 8 years, with the South Florida Water Management District for 30 years. She earned a bachelor's degree in broadcasting with a minor in business administration from the University of Florida. She's also continued her education by attending the university by the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University, Women in Public Policy Program, Center for Creative Leadership in North Carolina, Universidad Internacional Menendez Pelayo in Santander, Spain, Hispanic Leadership Training Program in Miami, and Leadership Palm Beach County. Ms. Corey was selected as one of 25 Hispanic women leaders nationwide, selected to participate in the National Hispanic Leadership Institute. You're definitely going to be missed on our council. So can we give her a round of applause? The South Florida Regional Planning Council, we have 4 new members, and I just want to highlight them because we're really excited to have you on board. Senator Rene Garcia from Miami-Dade County Commission, Vice Chair Oliver Miami-Dade County Commission, Mayor Anna Ziade, City of North Lauderdale, and also Eddie Martinez, Morrow County Commissioner. We're excited to have you aboard, and we're looking forward to your fresh and new innovative ideas. And with that, I'm kicking it back off to the co-chair, Chair Tom Mahara.
The first actual presentation is one that I'm sure is going to be very informative. I've heard him speak many times. From South Florida Water Management District, we are actually very fortunate to have the Executive Director, Drew Bartlett, come make himself available to us this morning. As with the speakers, I would remind everybody that there is a complete biographical sketch for each one of them in your package this morning. So I encourage you all to please take a look so you can appreciate the expertise that's coming to this meeting this morning. So I won't go into a lengthy introduction, but I will welcome him and thank him so much for spending time with us and giving us an overview and updating us on South Florida Water Management District. Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you.
The floor, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. And I also appreciate that you didn't go through my biography because that always is a tedious thing to do. I have to thank the chairman for recognizing Laura Corey. She has been so helpful for me personally and for the Water Management District for so many years. And thank you for recognizing her. We certainly are going to miss her, but it's well-deserved retirement, well-deserved. And so thank you very much, Laura, for being, it's great to see your face on the screen. So it's been 2 years since I've been at the Water Management District. I was hired in the March meeting of 2019 to lots of expectations and lots of fanfare with respect to Governor DeSantis and his commitment to Everglades restoration in the South Florida Water Management District. And we hit the ground running really with a commitment to science straight out of the gate, where the governing board greatly expanded our scientific endeavors with monitoring all throughout the district to make sure that we can root all of our decisions and our projects in science. And then he gave us the challenge with 29 projects to get going and expedite throughout the South Florida Water Management District. And the staff responded, and we really started getting to work. Last year, we executed over $700 million worth of contracts for projects, infrastructure projects around the district to improve our water management, water resources. But if you can think about it, we did that during this pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, all of us, county governments, water management district, were really adapting on the fly in a very fast manner. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank all the leadership on this call for everything they did during the pandemic. We often found ourselves turning to local government guidance on how to do our COVID operations at the Water Management District. And we saw the challenges and the decisions all of you had to make. And I just couldn't express my appreciation more for what you did during this to help us navigate this pandemic. So thank you all, and I applaud you. Later on in the agenda, Jennifer Reynolds and Jennifer Leeds and others will give you an update on the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Program, so I won't do that. But what I can tell you is the joke for many years under SERP is that there's only been one SERP project finished. Well, in the 2 years we've been here, we've finished 2 more, and we're underway on many more. And we are constructing projects all around the lake. As you will see, dirt is turning, and we're getting great funding from our leadership at the state level and the legislature and the governor's office to make sure that that continues. So I will not take too much time on that because you'll get a full download from Jennifer Reynolds, who I'm sure all of you know well from her time at the Corps. We were quite lucky in landing her at the Water Management District. So she's just a great communicator. The other thing I really wanted to mention was our commitment to adapting to sea level rise at the Water Management District. I know we have been partnering with the Southeastern Compact for a number of years, but we hired our district resiliency officer about a year ago, maybe a little longer, Dr. Moran out of Broward County, and she is helping us spearhead an effort to adapt to climate change with our operations in the South Florida Water Management District. We are getting behind the Corps of Engineers to do a restudy of the CNSF system. That's our flood control system in the Southeast, to make sure that we look at it with respect to sea level rise and make sure that it can still perform. While we partner with the Corps, we are going ahead and doing our own analysis, our own study at the South Florida Water Management District and at our critical flood control canals, applying for grants, federal grants at FEMA, to do some work on infrastructure to make sure we can continue to provide flood protection. And certainly we were challenged with that this summer with Tropical Storm Eta coming through Broward County, and earlier in the year with the Memorial Day rains in Miami-Dade. So we know it, we perform well. We know how we need to adapt, and so we are doing that and trying to make sure that we prepare for the future, because the sea is rising, and we got to be able to continue to move water where we need to move water. We are getting ready for hurricane season, as I know all of you are, and we've been updating our pumps, maintaining them, making sure that they're ready for hurricane season. So we will certainly continue to work with the local governments, the local drainage districts, to prepare for them when we see them arriving. But we do this pretty well in South Florida as a team between local governments and the district, and I absolutely appreciate that and what you all bring when those storms are bearing down on us. So, Mr. Chair, that's pretty much the brief overview I have for you. Certainly, I want to engage. I want to work together. I'm on my way to Miami-Dade right now to get on the Little River which is a challenging canal, the C7 canal for us in Miami-Dade County on many levels. And so we're going to go figure out what we can do with it. So, Mr. Chair, that's what I got. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bartlett, thank you very much. We really appreciate that. Are there any members that have any questions while Mr. Bartlett's still traveling? Okay, we don't see any, but once again, we really do appreciate you taking the time. We wish you well, have safe travels, and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just so everyone knows, I'm not driving, I'm riding, so I'm being safe.
Makes us feel a lot more comfortable. All right, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity Programs and Funding Opportunities, and we have the Executive Director, and I'm going to turn it over to Chair Bailey for introduction.
Sure. It's my pleasure to introduce Director Eagle. Dan Eagle was appointed to serve as the Executive Director of the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity in 2020. He has been a commercial real estate broker for nearly 2 decades. Director Eagle is no stranger to public service, as he has represented the South Florida in the Florida House of Representatives from 2012 to 2020. During his tenure in the Florida House, he served as the chairman of the House Energy and Utilities Subcommittee from 2014 to 2016, and as the House Majority Whip from 2016 to 2019. He also served as the Deputy Chief of Staff for the governor from 2008 to 2009, and that's where we initially met. I'm excited to have his presentation. Welcome.
Hey everyone, can you see me? I apologize. I'm trying to get this webcam to work on mine.
I see you now.
Great, excellent. Hey, thanks for the opportunity. Good to see some familiar faces. Wish we could all be in person, but obviously we're doing our best to combat COVID, and the governor's out there nonstop making sure we have a vaccine. But appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all, and thank you, Mario, Chairman, I should say, for the invitation. What I want to do is just kind of give a brief overview of what the department's been doing, but I just want to start with the state of the economy, and the presentation I have goes into that as well. But thankfully, we're in a really good spot. First, I'll start by the governor invited me to work with DEO this past September, and I was honored by the opportunity. Certainly, Department of Economic Opportunity has had its challenges over the past year when it comes to unemployment. We still continue to work through that, but that's because of the COVID-19 challenge, the unprecedented lockdown and global crisis that we saw. But we're on our way to recovery. We're seeing some great things. We're seeing some good statistics. Florida as a whole, we're the 17th largest economy in the world. That's the world, which is incredible. That's if you line up all the states to compare them to the countries, we line up at number 17. Obviously, COVID was a bump in the road, but I think that even presents us, sets us up even better. You know, if we're competing with other states, other countries who have been locked down for the most part during COVID, Florida's been open for business. The governor's made sure of that. He's taken quite a lot of flack for it, but we got to give him credit. Politics aside, we've had low unemployment simply because the governor made a stand and said, yes, we need to balance health and public safety, but we can't lose sight of the economy, people's livelihood, and their freedom, and therefore we have low unemployment. So Florida set itself up great over the last 10 years when it came to rebuilding after the last, the Great Recession. And because of that, we've had low taxes, we've had low regulatory environment, and we just have a beautiful environment physically as well. So people have always looked to Florida, and if they were ever thinking about moving to Florida, well, if you're in one of these other states that you've been locked down, you're certainly looking at it now. I mean, talking with Disney the other day in California, they can only operate at 15%. Whereas here in Florida, it's vastly different. So, you know, big companies and individuals are certainly looking to Florida to see, you know, what opportunities are available, and there are plenty. So I'm going to go ahead and share my my screen, and I think this button will do it. Are you guys seeing a presentation?
We were seeing it initially. When you shared the screen, we didn't see it anymore. So it was there initially.
All right, let me see what I'm doing.
Toggle back.
Seeing it now?
Yes, it's there. Thank you.
Okay, great. So want to give a quick overview about the department and our divisions, and through that maybe come up with ways that we can work better together. Not that we haven't worked great together in your different communities, but I want to make sure you're aware of what we do. What is DEO? Prior to 2011, DEO did not exist. There were 3 separate agencies under the governor's purview that were all combined into one, and those agencies still live as 3 different divisions that make up DEO. First, we've got the Division of Community Development, and that's probably the area where we work most closely with local governments, the planning councils, counties, cities, you name it. That was formerly the Department of Community Affairs. The state made the decision in 2011 to give local control to your destiny, how you plan to develop your county and move forward. So when it comes to comp plan amendments, that was usually driven by Department of Community Affairs. Now that's largely driven by the counties. We still have some oversight over that when it comes to comment, review, agency coordination, but that fate is left in the county's hands. So we've somewhat downsized that agency. Now it's a division within DEO. We contract with in that division with Florida Housing and Finance Corporation, where we do affordable housing. We have our loan programs. We have the Office of Broadband that's newly established. And then a big part of that agency or that division is the Office of Long-Term Resiliency. Through that office, we have HUD funds, CDBG funds, where we have been working with local communities to make sure that you can rebuild after storms and then be more resilient for future storms. Then we have the Division of Strategic Business Development. That was formerly the Governor's Office of Tourism, Trade, and Economic Development. Through that division, we contract with Enterprise Florida, Visit Florida, Space Florida, to make sure that people all over the country and the world know that Florida is open for business. We're open for tourists. Please come here and spend your money and then stay, open your business and live here. Division of Workforce Services, that is where we work very closely with the Department of Labor to administer unemployment insurance, known in Florida as reemployment assistance. We also work closely in that division with Career Source for workforce development, making sure people that need a job can find one or can find the skills they need to be able to move up in their career. And then we give out the unemployment statistics monthly, and had some exciting news this past Monday, which I'll share. So we have over 1,800 employees here at DEO working diligently day in, day out to serve the people of Florida. And if you look at it at the federal level, the comparison is we as an agency are HUD, we're Department of Labor, we're Department of Commerce, all wrapped into one as we work with our contracted partners. Unemployment in Florida, as I was talking, our Florida unemployment rate is now at 4.8%. That is below the national average of 6.3%. That's a very healthy unemployment rate. Certainly we want to get lower and lower. We want everybody that's looking for a job to be able to find a job, and jobs are out there, and we'll get into that as well. But certainly as COVID is still a part of our lives, we want to make sure that people feel healthy and safe, which is why the governor is so heavily focused on the vaccine, and actually had a great announcement this morning that those over 50 can start, will be eligible for shots starting on Monday. So national unemployment rate is 6.3%. We are well below that. We've had 9 months of consecutive job growth since April, added 700,000 jobs that were previously lost due to the shutdown have been added back in the state, and we are well on the way towards recovery. Some local unemployment rates, West Palm Beach, you're at 4.8%, Fort Lauderdale, 5.3%, Miami, 8.1%, obviously a larger metropolitan area there. A few others in the Treasure Coast, Martin County, 4%, Palm Beach, 4.8%, Indian River, 5%, and St. Lucie, 5.2%. Again, all very healthy in comparison to what we're seeing across the country and in other states. And just to give an idea of the jobs that are out there, you can see in January 2019, in a healthy economy, we had over 300,000 online job ads showing that even though in a healthy economy, there were certainly people out there looking, employers, for those who are looking for gainful employment. And you see kind of a wave there that's typical with a seasonal adjustment. But then May 2020, you can see there about 3/4 of the way of the graph, we were down below 200,000 online job ads. So obviously that was at when the state was shut down or just beginning to reopen. But then you see here, January 2021 almost doubled, nearly 400,000 online job ads available. So just to show you that anybody looking for a job should be able to find one, and we look forward to helping them connect. Unemployment rate over the past few decades, or at least to the early 2000s, obviously at the beginning of this graph, we see when we were in the real estate boom, very healthy economy. And then as that bubble burst and the Great Recession began, we had a gradual rise to that then all-time high of 10.9%. Then a gradual decline over the next 10 years to the new all-time low of 3.3% in February 2020, just over a year ago. And then you can see that drastic climb to May 2020, right after the shutdown, 14.2%. And just look at the difference there in those humps. That first one, of course, a gradual one over the Great Recession, and then this drastic spike virtually overnight, going from an all-time low to an all-time high due to the pandemic and people having to be forced out of work through no fault of their own. But the good news is on the backside of that slide, you see, or that graph, you see that that drastic dive. We're back down to 4.8%. Again, very healthy, but certainly want to get closer to where we were pre-pandemic and get closer to 3.3%, and let's hope even lower. So we are working towards that day in, day out. This slide is fascinating. Obviously, if you've tuned in to the news over the past year and heard anything about DEO, it was regarding unemployment and, frankly, DEO's challenges when it came to serving those who were unemployed and looking for assistance from the government, which if you're unemployed through no fault of their own, federal and state law says that you are owed assistance based on your wages that your employer has paid into. So if you look at the beginning of this graph, these are claims on average per week, starting in the 90s. And you can see how low those are just over time. Recession of the 90s, Hurricane Andrew dot-com bubble, 9/11, various hurricanes of 3, 4, and 5 status. And then you get to the Great Recession about 3/4 of the way through this graph. You see that slight hump, again, still relative to what we've seen in the past. The highest we had at the Great Recession was an average of 40, or high weekly average was 40,000 claims per week. And then again, a gradual decline to the beginning of 2020. The average claims were just under 5,000 a week. And then that drastic spike to over 500,000 claims in a week, over 10,000% increase, which is the highest of any state when it comes to that rate. So you can see nothing could have fully prepared the department, the state, anybody to understand what kind of demand would have been on the Connect system. But then again, a gradual or sharp decline to now under 20,000 claims per week. So we are getting back towards normalcy, but certainly there are people out there who are still looking to unemployment for assistance, and we want to make sure we can help them find a job. So while we do that, while we certainly work to make sure those who are owed unemployment assistance are receiving it, and then more so making sure that those who are looking for jobs have the ability, we're also working very closely with your communities there in South Florida and the Treasure Coast, but across the entire state, to make sure that the monies that we have for grant opportunities are in the hands of the communities. The governor has told me day in, day out, this money sitting in state and federal coffers is doing nothing for the people of Florida. If it's going to be allocated, let's make sure it's allocated to the communities, to the taxpayers where it originated, so that it can better their lives. So over the past 5 years, the department has awarded nearly $500 million to South Florida and the Treasure Coast. And you can see those kind of outlined here through small business bridge loans, defense grants, and a majority of those through the Rebuild Florida program, as I mentioned before, the Office of Long-Term Resiliency we have here, where we administer CDBG funds from HUD to make sure that your communities are rebuilding after storms, and also more importantly, being more strong and resilient for those future unforeseen storms, which we all know we will see because we are Florida. We have our budget in front of the legislature, which is obviously ongoing right now with session, and the Governor's Florida Leads budget, the portions of that related to DEO are outlined here. We're asking the legislature to fully fund the affordable housing program to the tune of over $420 million. Home sales are strong even during COVID, and proof of people wanting to come to Florida from those other states because of the freedom and the ability to live their lives here. So that trust fund is healthy. We want to make sure, especially in times for those who need it in any given time, but especially during COVID, we're looking for affordable housing, have that opportunity. We're asking for $50 million for the Florida Job Growth Grant Fund. This fund was administered in 2017 by the legislature, and we at DEO worked with the governor to look into the communities across our state to see where the needs are for infrastructure, for workforce, for education, so that jobs are prevalent in those areas. We're asking for $50 million from general revenue. However, the governor just the other day announced, with the additional money coming down from the federal government through the recent congressional act, he wants another $150 million placed into that. So $200 million total ask. So if that is granted, look forward to working with you all to see where the best areas of our state need to be funded. Visit Florida, $50 million. Obviously, with the shutdown, tourism took a hit, and we are a tourism state. We want to make sure people know that Florida is open. I believe the governor is asking for an additional $50 million with that stimulus money, for a total of $100 million for Visit Florida. Statewide branding campaign. This is for Enterprise Florida to be across our country, across the globe, frankly, talking about how Florida is open for business, and this would assist them in that effort. Space Florida Aerospace Financing Program. Florida has been for a long time home for the space industry, and we want to continue that. And then the Florida Office of Broadband, newly created in July of this past year, during the 2020 legislative session. $3.2 million we're asking for that office. Broadband is so incredibly important in our daily lives as we sit here from all of our respective communities, yet we're able to meet thanks to broadband. Some communities don't have that ability, and whether you're trying to telework, telehealth, to see your doctor, or work or learn from home, especially at any given time, but during the lockdown, while that was so needed for many families, some families did not have the opportunity to take advantage of those programs because they did not have broadband. So that is a very important and priority of all of ours. We have 3 legislative priorities we're working on. We have the DEO Modernization Act, which would bring Connect into the future, into the modern times. Connect system failed miserably during the COVID shutdown. Unfortunately, it was built in 2013. It was not built for the demand that we saw. No one could have predicted the demand that we saw, but even with that demand, it highlighted problems within the system. It needs to be cloud-based, it needs to be modular, it needs to be user-friendly. The staff behind the scenes here at DEO has worked tirelessly in spite of that program to make sure that the Floridians who need assistance are getting it. We've paid out over $24 billion to over 2.3 million Floridians in unemployment money. That's a lot of money. I hate that that number is so high because it shows the need that Floridians were in, the dire need, but also it's a lot of money that we're going to have to make up for in the future. But DEO was able to assist them in spite of that's the technology not being up to date. We have a bill by Senator Gaynor and Representative Gio Lombardo, who replaced me in the House in Southwest Florida, public records exemption. We administer small business development loans here at DEO. And during the pandemic, we had bridge loans. And then we learned as we were accepting those applications, we were handling sensitive information of individuals that should not be subject to public records requests. Obviously, I think we all as taxpayers have a right to know what businesses are applying for what loans backed by the government, but the credit scores, social security numbers of those individuals should not be available for the public to see. A bill by Senator Gruters and Chip LaMarca, which would re-implement the QTI program. QTI, Qualified Target Industry, is a program that we've had here in Florida. The DEO has administered. It sunset in 2020. Unfortunately, we would like to reinstitute that. The legislature, the state has taken a deep dive into all of the tax incentive programs that have been available to the state, and we reformed that tremendously. I was a part of that initiative, making sure that we are not wasting taxpayer dollars, that we are accountable, that we are transparent. We're not just handing out big fat checks to businesses to come to Florida with little oversight. This is not that. We got rid of those programs. This program is pay for performance on the back end. If a company comes to Florida, enters into a contract with Florida to make a significant investment and create a certain amount of jobs at a certain threshold of salary, we would give them a tax break on the back end. That's what we've got going on at DEO currently. It's very busy, not only because of the demands placed on our department because of COVID, but working with your communities, and certainly because of the legislative session as well. But happy to answer any questions you might have, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that information, and also this is a great opportunity to ask some questions. I'm sure that we have some among our members. So if you'll give me just a second, we will identify someone. Okay. I'm sorry, Mario Bailey.
Mr.
Chair
Chair, Mr. Chair, you're aware of this, of the Regional Planning Council across the state. My question is, how can we be more helpful to you and be a great partner to you going forward?
That's a great question, and you all have been. Actually, with the Office of Broadband, we as I mentioned, started July 1 of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, really, or obviously the state was starting to open, but it was a challenging time to do that. The legislature gave us the office. We had to implement that. We didn't have funding to do so, but we have staff here that we pushed into that office to make sure we were up and running. And the first thing we did is got together with the regional planning councils to have that discussion across the state about what the broadband needs are. So thank you for offering that structure to be able to have that conversation. We were able to do that virtually. And then as we continue to administer these grant programs, one thing I want to make sure we're doing is having those relationships. In some areas across the state, and not saying any particular, but I have seen that the grant programs that we have may not be known in certain communities. I want to make sure those are known to everybody so that when we're applying, when we get the applications, it's spread out across the state. There's no holes in different communities. So happy to continue to have those conversations with you as a whole and in your individual communities to make sure you're aware of these grant programs so that we can have discussions to better serve you.
Mayor Geller.
Thank you. I wasn't actually a question. I just wanted to say that I think Florida is fortunate to have Dane there. I've known Dane since he was, were you assistant or deputy chief of staff?
Deputy.
Deputy chief of staff.
I was an assistant and then moved up to deputy. Yes, sir. I remember.
I've known Dane since he was deputy chief of staff to Governor Christ and in the legislature. And I think Florida is very fortunate to have him in his current position.
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to see you, and I've enjoyed working with your brother over the past years as well.
Chair Bailey, do you want to take it from here to close it out? It doesn't look like we have any other questions.
Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to meet with us. We look forward again to working with you and continue like the long-standing relationship and be just a great partner. And so we will push out the information. So thank you again for just being with us today.
You got it, Chairman. Good to see you all, and thanks for the opportunity. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, sir. The next agenda item is 20 years of SERP, present and future, and we have an extraordinary opportunity to take a step back and actually get some unique insight into that program from an individual who has been involved with that program for many years. Mr. Michael Davis will give us a bit of a history lesson on it, which I think is going to be very informative. Mr. Davis is currently the Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at WGI. His unique insight, though, comes from his background at the federal level and his involvement in several agencies. One, of course, particular interest is the Army Corps of Engineers, and he also spent some time as a member of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, as well as time with the EPA and Department of Interior. So we're very fortunate to have Mr. Davis not only here, but also as a member of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. First of all, can you see my screen and can you hear me? Let's get that out of the way first. Both. All right, we're good. All right, I'm going to start just making an observation on this cover slide here. When we were formulating SERP and defending the legislation in 2000, we really had to cast this as America's Everglades. And I was the guy pretty much on the front lines providing congressional testimony around in Washington and in Florida on this. And So it is America's Everglades, and I think it's important us to get our mind around that. This is a national, international treasure that we are investing in and trying to restore and protect. So Jeff introduced me, and you might say, well, why is this consultant here talking to you? I spent 23 years in the government and mostly in Washington, and had the pleasure of working for President Clinton for both terms as the Deputy Assistant Secretary and also in the White House for a couple of years. And as Jeff said, I've had the honor to be on the Regional Planning Council since 2009 and really appreciate the value that all of you bring to the state of Florida. I am a scientist by training, although that transitioned in my career to more policy, legislative oriented career. And I drive a race car. And the reason I mention that is in racing school, they teach you not to spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror. There's generally not a lot of things behind you that can hurt you. Most of the things that'll hurt you are beside you, in front of you. But as it comes to major efforts like restoring the Everglades, I think it is important to periodically look in the mirror and see where we came from and what was going on and now over 20 years ago. So I start with the question, what has happened since Andrew? And it's a little bit of a trick question because I'm not talking about the hurricane. I'm actually talking about my grandson who was born in 1996. And so my frame of reference for Everglades restoration is really with Drew and when he was born, and that's Drew today. So a lot's happened. He still likes his grandfather. So let's talk about what's happened since Andrew. And today specifically, we're going to talk about what we went through when we formulated the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, which from here on in this presentation will be SERP, and how we formulated the Water Resources Development Act of 2000, which authorized SERP. We'll dive into a little bit of the policy foundation of SERP, some of the things we were thinking when we were working on this, and then maybe some just other random thoughts and observations from a recovering policy person. Overarching, it is a real test of our ability to complete large-scale ecosystem restoration projects. When we were doing this, when we were putting SERP together in the 90s, we were frankly making it up. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but there was not a textbook. There was not a manual to go to turn to a page and say, how do you restore ecosystems on the scale that we're talking about with Everglades? It wasn't there. So we had the good fortune and the opportunity to really kind of chart some new ground. And it also, SERP really is a real textbook study into science, policy, and politics, because all three of those things are integral and involved in not only what we did to develop SERP and the legislation, but as we go forward today. And perhaps the most important one is the last bullet. It's going to test our staying power and our ability to focus on the end game. It's not a short-term endeavor. Our proposition is going to take some time and some patience, the right amount of patience. When you make environmental policy and law, there's a lot of things that are in play. Obviously, our environmental policy, the law drives it in some ways. Science has to drive it. There are real world fiscal considerations that influence it. But then there's also politics, and I don't mean that in a bad way. That's our country, that's our democracy, and that's part of the calculus when you make policy, not just environmental policy, but any policy. So an overview of SERP. We're going to really focus today on 1996, the year Andrew was born, to 2000. I was working for President Clinton and actually got tapped on the shoulder by Al Gore and said, you're going to lead and get this thing done, right? So I spent a lot of time in Florida and ultimately moved down here 20 years ago, and I've been here 20 years living in this great state in South Florida. But some of the things we did in the Water Resources Development Act of 1996, which really laid the legislative groundwork for SERP, was we said, we got to get started now. We got to do something now. So we identified some critical projects, authorized those in 1996, but we also imposed a very strict deadline on ourselves. We wrote the legislation, so we imposed a 3-year deadline that said, we're going to write the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan in 3 years, and we're going to turn it in by July of 1999. This was 96. That made a lot of people really nervous because, again, there was no manual, no textbook, so we really had to be focused, get the team organized, and get the job done. And we did. I'm proud to say that we completed SERP and delivered it to Congress in 1999. But that was the plan. The plan was good, and I think it has stood the test of time for the last 20 years. It's still good, but it was just a plan. We had to get buy-in from the country through an authorization in the Water Resources Development Act of 2000. Otherwise, it's just a plan. And that's what we did. We drafted the legislation after July of 99, and we got it enacted. We'll talk more about that. The plan itself is about 4,000 pages. We spent about $20 million developing the plan. This is in mid-1990 dollars. It was a true team effort, bipartisan effort. A lot of agencies at the federal and state level, local level participating, a lot of stakeholders participating, from the 2 Indian tribes to municipalities, and environmental community representatives, obviously very active in this. So there was a lot of players involved. And I would emphasize here the bipartisan nature of this. It's really important. And I think we got to stay focused on how important that is to get this thing, to get this job finished. This was July 1, 1999. This is a very young looking Al Gore. That's a young Michael Davis. You can see the back of my head sitting there. Al and I literally drove in the limo and delivered our homework to Congress on July 1, 1999, as we committed to doing this in 3 years, and we turned our homework in on time to Congress. The plan is fundamentally about getting the water right with these 4 factors: the quantity, quality, timing, and distribution, to try to the extent we can, mimic the natural Everglades ecosystem, with the realization that about 50% of the spatial extent of the Everglades is lost forever. We live there now. We're not going to get that back. So 50% of the land that was naturally the Everglades is lost. So taking the other 50% that remains and focusing on getting the quantity, quality, timing, and distribution of water right is the essence of the plan. And you guys have seen this in many times, the historic flows of the Everglades versus the current flow that reflect the drainage system that has very effectively been put in place by the federal and state governments to do its intended purpose, to allow us to live here, to grow crops here, and so on. But certainly the consequences of that is about 1.8 to 2 billion gallons of water every day that would normally be in the natural system are no longer in the natural system. They're lost out to the Gulf and to the Atlantic Ocean. That's the problem. Now, when we started developing SERP in 1996, the first thing we did, we got the team together, the leadership of the team, and we said we need some overarching principles. And these are really important because as we talk about SERP today and whether things are going right or whether they're being implemented properly, I think it's important to kind of go back to this because this actually ultimately informed the law as well. But we made it very clear as we started that 3-year journey to develop SERP, the overarching objective was restoration and preservation of the South Florida ecosystem, that we would use only the best available science to make our decisions, that we would engage the public and stakeholders in a very inclusive and open process. And we did. I participated in scores of public meetings and hearings as part of that process. And then all of our partners will be viewed as partners in this, including the tribes and the local agencies. And this a principle that's really important, a principle that we don't know what we don't know. We're talking about a 30+ year plan. We know things are going to change. We're going to learn new things along the way. Science, the technology and innovation will be brought to bear. So we integrated into the plan the concept of adaptive management to recognize that we're going to make changes along the way. We're not going to hit the bullseye perfectly every time with this plan. We'll make some adjustments. So after the plan was finished, the job was to write the legislation for WRDA 2000. The first draft of this was actually on my computer in the Pentagon. I still have a floppy disk. I just don't have anything to put it in to read it, but I have the disk that this is on. So we drafted it, we negotiated it, we defended it, and we passed it in Congress by pretty substantial margins, and it was enacted. And what it did, it authorized. First of all, before we talk about that, let me just go back and what is a Water Resources Development Act? Because there's a lot of talk about what WRDA is, and sometimes we don't get it right. WRDA is an authorization of projects that allows for an appropriation, but it doesn't appropriate money for projects. So there's a two-step process to get projects in the ground, to get it authorized in a WRDA bill, and then get an annual appropriation or get an appropriation for that particular project in an appropriation bill. So even though there's dollars associated with projects in WRDA bills, it's not an appropriation. So that's really important for all of us and all of you guys, particularly that are elected and want to advocate, need to advocate for funding for these things. Is a two-step process. WRDA should be every 2 years. We actually did 3 in the 90s. I was involved in leading 96, 99, and 2000. The first WRDA bill was in 74. We really lost some traction because we didn't have one from 2000 to 2007. And we got off of that biennial process, but it picked up in 2007. And the good news is we've had one in 14, 16, 18, and we had one enacted in late 2020. So we're hopefully back on that two-year cycle. And the importance of that is it keeps these projects flowing, keeps the momentum going. So this was a great day. This was December 11th, 2000. We're standing in the Oval Office with my boss, and he's signing the Water Resources Development Act of 2000. I'm going to come back to this picture in a minute and go down memory lane with some of the people in this picture. I know that many of you recognize many of the fine folks in this picture. That's the pen. That's actually hanging on my office wall in my home. I'm very proud of this, and that the president gave me the day that he signed the Water Resources Bill. What's in there? What's in WRDA 2000? We said, again, we need to get started. So we authorized about $1 billion worth of initial projects. We authorized some pilot projects and codified a cost-sharing arrangement between the state of Florida and the federal government. It had 68 components identified as part of SERP, and for the most part, that's still pretty true today. And we identified these pilot projects. This is really important. Again, it goes back to the proposition that we know we don't understand everything fully about how the ecosystem is going to react or how certain technologies are going to work. And we wanted to test, for example, the theory of aquifer storage and recovery, ASR wells. And I think Colonel Reynolds is going to talk more about some of the successes we've had on that a little bit later. But we authorized that in WRDA 2000 and said we need to test these ideas through these pilot projects to make sure that our assumptions about how they're going to work would actually work. Now, the policy framework, which is really, you know, I'm a policy wonk, I will admit. Some of the things that are really important in the legislation, this is in the law now. We've shifted from those principles that I talked about that guided us in the development of SERP to what's actually in WRDA 2000 that we put in there and imposed upon ourselves. This is one of the most important statements because it captures the essence of what this is about. The overarching objective of the plan, which is SERP, is the restoration, preservation, and protection of the South Florida ecosystem while providing for other water-related needs of the region, including water supply, and flood protection. We had a big debate, and those of you who are pros in legislative drafting, you'll know that sometimes single words make a big difference. We had a big debate about whether we should insert the word "the" here, and we didn't because we weren't agreeing to take care of everything. We just said there's some other water-related needs we need to take care of, but it doesn't mean that we're going to fix all of the problems in SERP. And so that was a debate. We also did some things that had never been done before in environmental or water resources legislation. We required an agreement between the president and the governor. And the reason we did that, I'm coming from this from the federal perspective. I'm the guy that had to sit at the hearing table and convince members from Idaho or members from Alaska or California why this was important. and why it was a federal project, why it was truly America's Everglades, and why they should be interested in investing in something in South Florida. And so part of that was making sure that we had a legislative structure that protected that federal investment. And one of the things we imposed upon ourselves was an agreement between a required agreement between the president and the governor about how the water would be used. Now, I'll be honest with you, when we drafted this, we didn't know that the president and the governor would be brothers, but it worked out that way, and maybe that was good. We required a set of regulations, programmatic regulations, something we invented because we knew we couldn't get all the details covered in the law, and we didn't want to cover all the details in the law, but we wanted to defer that to a rule that has the effect of law later on, where we could work out some of those details. We have something really important in the law called the savings clause, and that gets those of you who are we're all interested in maintaining flood protection, maintaining water supply, and what we said that, look, if you have permits for water supply, this SERP is not going to affect your legal rights to that. It's not going to affect the level of flood protection that you have been provided through other projects, and we certainly have no effect on the tribal compacts. This is really important, this slide. It gets to the federal interest, and it really, I think, illustrates the federal interest. 80% of this water that we're capturing and cleaning and putting back in the system goes back into the natural system for ecosystem restoration. Now, we were fortunate enough to be able to capture it enough water so we could allocate a portion of that, roughly 20%, back to water supply, back to agriculture, and so on. And this was really important. But the essence of it is that 80%, again, the federal investment going for ecosystem restoration. I talked about the programmatic regulations. Again, the idea here is those of you who are experts and have done a lot of legislative drafting, you know you want to have the right amount of detail, but you don't want to handcuff yourself too much. You usually defer to a regulation to allow that, and that's what we did here to lay out some of the details of the implementation of SERP in that rule. We also imposed scientific review, independent scientific review on ourselves. And part of the reason was, frankly, we knew that those of us who were drafting this and defending it, and we would be around to be the real implementers. Most of us have moved on into other positions and other places, and we knew that we'd have different governors and different presidents, and we wanted to make sure that we continue that principle of peer review and independent scientific review, and we still have that today. And there's through the Academy of Sciences Natural Research Council does a report card on SERP and how it's going. We also codified the cost share, which is really important because up to this point, if you looked at federal water resources projects, the cost share was typically 75% federal or 65%, 75 to 65, depending on the type of project it was. In this case, because Florida was getting a lot of the benefits, and there were some, part of it was associated with water quality, which is typically a state responsibility, not a federal responsibility, at least to cleaning up the water quality. We agreed with the state of Florida, we'd have a 50-50 cost share. In 2000, we estimated the cost of this to be around $8 billion, and we estimated it was going to take about 30 years to implement. In 2004, the estimate went up to 10.9, and just last year, now the estimate is about $23 billion to finish this, and $200 billion or so to operate and maintain it once it's done. Now, let's shift into the politics of this, and back to my comment about bipartisan and why it's so important. We had a lot of really good help from a lot of people here. I had a president and a vice president that were my bosses that made this a top priority for the Clinton administration, which gave us a lot of license to come down and get this done. We had a governor in Jeb Bush who was unequivocally supportive. We had a Senator, John Chafee, who was the chairman of the Environment Public Works Committee in the Senate, supportive, and a few others that you know, frankly, it was an interesting story here. Senator Chafee was going to retire, and he committed to us. We had meetings with him, and he committed to us in his last year in the Senate as chairman of the Environment Public Works Committee that he would make Everglades restoration a priority. We felt pretty good about that. He was a moderate Republican from Rhode Island, and he was leading committee. We felt good about that, and we could work with him. The problem was he died right after that. And so, well, that was obviously tragic. We lost a great public servant and a great senator. And then we're looking for a replacement. You may recall, some of you, that Senator Bob Smith from New Hampshire was a very conservative Republican who left the Republican Party because it wasn't conservative enough under Newt Gingrich's approaches. And that tells you where he was on that spectrum. In an attempt to get him back into the Republican Party, he ran for president as an independent. To get him back in the Republican Party, they offered him the chairmanship of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. And so now we've gone from one of the most moderate Republican senators leading the committee to one of the most conservative. We thought we were really, to put it bluntly, screwed here. But as it turned out, we weren't. Senator Smith became a real champion of Everglades restoration. He vacationed in Florida a lot. He brought his kids down here. He told me stories about his kids and on Tamiami Trail seeing alligators and what it meant to them, and how he had watched the reduction in wading birds himself over a couple of decades, and it troubled him. And so over a lot of good bourbon, we had a lot of good talks, and we became actually good friends, which was interesting. And it taught me a lesson that sometimes you need to know more about people before you make final conclusions about them. But we became good friends, and he was a champion. And it actually turned out well because he was able to bring some of the more conservative Republican members along and get this passed in the Senate. Congressman Clay Shaw, many of you, if not all of you know, great hero, great public servant. He was always a champion of Everglades and led the bipartisan delegation in many ways, along with Bob Graham, to help us get this done. But one of the things that really helped, and this is how the stars line up, you guys know this, he was in a really close election with Elaine Bloom. And we literally came down to the last day of the session in the House to get this on the floor. And Speaker Hastert, Clay went to the speaker and said, you know, if I don't get this passed, I'm going to lose. It's so important to my constituents in my district, I'm going to lose. And so we got it on the floor and we got it passed on the last day of the session in the House. And Congressman Shaw ended up beating Elaine Bloom. I think it was just north of 500 votes. It was very, very tight. So he was correct. So just looking at this picture, I got cut out of this picture, so I just posted another picture. It's not a mugshot, but I was actually standing right there next to Bob Graham. But look at the picture and what we had in the Oval Office on December the 11th of 2000. This is what we've got to maintain and get back to get this journey completed. We had Clay Shaw, we had a young Jeb Bush there, Bruce Babbitt, the Secretary of the Interior, Bob Smith from New Hampshire, and other representatives, including Bob. But this was December the 11th of 2000. The day before, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in Gore versus Bush against Vice President Gore, my boss. We, in spite of that, we stood there together. We had a great day and a great celebration. The next day, Al Gore conceded publicly to the nation to President Bush, what became President Bush. So we worked together. We walked the halls together. It was 27 members of the Florida delegation at the time. It's 29 now. That's what's important to preserve and to maintain. So with that, I thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure. And again, thanks to all of you for participating in the Regional Planning Council. I think what we do is so important, and we've got to continue to fight for it and maintain that as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. We really appreciate that. It's exceedingly beneficial to have a good, clear understanding of how and why, and especially from the point of view of the principles going forward. The next presentation will be by Jennifer Reynolds, who currently serves I'm sorry?
Before you make that, my executive director, she reached out to me. She wanted me to mention one quick thing. So we want to thank Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Reynolds for holding her family spring break for being here with us today. And also we had two to join, Vice Mayor Oliver Gilbert and Mayor Anna Ziade. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Bailey. So as I was saying, Jennifer Reynolds serves currently as the Director for Ecosystem Restoration and Capital Projects Division at South Florida Water Management. Before joining the district in March 2020, she served in the United States Army for 24 years as an active duty engineer. In addition to her time working on the Everglades restoration with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, she brings experience managing emergency operations and supporting efforts in more than 90 countries worldwide. And I suggest everyone take a moment to read her full bio. Jennifer, you and I have something in common. We're both retired Army colonels. So I especially thank you, not only for your service, but also for the fact demonstrating an Army attitude that you were willing to come off of spring break to be with us this morning. So thank you for all of those things. Jennifer, you got the floor.
Thank you, Chairman, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you today. We actually took some time with my family this week and we visited some of the great parks that we have across our state, and so that was really fun. However, I would not recommend taking a minivan on any of the unimproved roads in our state or national forests, as we managed to get ourselves stuck in some sand and had to find a 4x4 and some tow straps to get us out. But my kids had a great time having a mud fight while we were waiting for all of that to occur. So, but we had a great time.
Great.
So I want to thank Michael Davis also for providing such a great backdrop for this presentation. He gave you a lot of the history of Everglades restoration and of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where we are in terms of progress and how much is really going on. For the past 20 years, there have been a lot of stops and starts and frustration with keeping projects moving. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, really under the leadership of Governor DeSantis, has been a tremendous amount of momentum regained in this program. And that has to do with the collaboration that Mr. Davis was talking about, where people are really coming together again and moving forward in a concerted effort that includes not just the funding, although the funding is a huge part of it, but also the collaboration of federal, state, local, and tribal entities coming together to advocate for priorities that help us to conserve the water resources of our state and of our nation here in South Florida. And so I'll see if I can drive these slides. All right. So just to start, as was mentioned, this was originally conceived to be a 30-year or so journey, multi-billion-dollar effort. And in 20 years, we've come a long way, although we didn't have the funding to stay on track the way that the plan was originally envisioned. However, the Water Management District started and has been continuing to move the program forward, starting with land acquisition, for example. We've acquired over 265,000 acres of land. 65% of all the SERP land has been acquired and is allowing us to keep the momentum going on projects as we receive the funding in order to complete things. So let's talk about the funding. I took a little snapshot of the integrated delivery schedule. That's sort of our roadmap, and many of you have seen it before. I didn't try to include it on a slide because it's an 11 by 17 piece of paper printed on both sides. One side is a large spreadsheet that outlines the progress of authorized projects and how those will be funded and constructed over time. And this was added in the IDS schedule draft a couple of years ago. And I think it's a really helpful chart that helps us kind of understand the investment that's been made on both the federal and the state side. And so the state funding is there in blue, but the total funding is that black line that goes through the middle. And so over $6 billion has already been invested in South Florida projects, including some of those critical projects that Mr. Davis talked about earlier that started before SERP was authorized, and then including the SERP projects moving forward, also including some of the water quality projects that the state has undertaken. Unfortunately, I am showing you my screen from my iPad and it is manipulating my pictures. I think I'm going to have this problem throughout the presentation. I'm wondering if I should have someone else try and share the slides.
We can certainly do that. Have you, does Treasure Coast have the presentation?
Yes, we do. We have it here, and we'll get it fired up.
Thank you.
Okay, well, while you try that, because obviously you can tell that these two pictures of the Kissimmee River restoration are turned sideways. And so I think the device that I'm using is not ideal. I don't have any animation or anything in the slides, so they're static. So I think the version that you have should work. There we go, that's better. So starting with some of these critical projects that got started even before the SERP plan was authorized. So starting with Kissimmee River, this project, you know, is north of Lake Okeechobee, and it's really the headwaters of the Everglades. And so this is where it all begins. And as part of draining South Florida and making it inhabitable and providing flood protection for communities and for agriculture, the Kissimmee River was channelized. And we realized very quickly that that was going to be problematic and detrimental to how we conserve water and the quality of that water as it enters Lake Okeechobee. And the Kissimmee River Restoration Project, I'm happy to announce that the Corps will be completing construction on this project this year. And it restores over 26,000 acres of wetland habitat. It returns 40 miles of the Kissimmee River back to those oxbows that help slow down the flow of water, preserve the ecosystems, and creates an over 2-mile wide floodplain across the Kissimmee River. And although it's not one of the photos I'm showing you right now, we saw that floodplain in action again for the first time since it was originally channelized, for the first time after Hurricane Irma, and really saw the benefits of the Kissimmee River Restoration Project. You could go to the next slide. On the opposite end of the system, one of the critical projects was starting to uncork the system down at Everglades National Park. The Tamiami Trail runs across the state and separates the flow of water from our water conservation areas and all things in the Central Everglades from the Southern Everglades, Everglades National Park and Florida Bay. And so one of the critical projects was to start to raise that road and allow sheet flow of water across into the Southern Everglades, into Everglades National Park and onto Florida Bay. One thing I want to mention is for the first time last week, we implemented, and this is going to sound a little technical for a moment, so bear with me, but we implemented the flow formula that allows us to send water to the park for other than flood protection. So what that means is we've had water in the water conservation areas, and until last week, we always calculated the amount of water that could go to Everglades National Park based only on rainfall from the water conservation areas or for flood protection requirements. For the first time last week, because we have implemented the combined operational plan as part of modified water deliveries, which included raising these bridges, for the first time last week, Everglades National Park needed water, and because we changed how we operate it, we sent water to Everglades National Park solely for the natural system. It's a huge win. That's really technical, but it is a really big deal that's hard to describe, but fundamentally changes how we're delivering water and includes the natural system as a water supply user in our state. And so that is a great day for the Everglades, great day for the national park, and a great day for the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Program. If you could go to the next slide. So then in the first generation of Everglades projects under SERP, these were authorized in the WRDA of 2007. And so the first one I'm going to tell you about is the Indian River Lagoon South. This is a suite of projects, and many of you know about this suite of projects through the C44. This is a very large storage reservoir that is east of Lake Okeechobee and serves the C44 basin. This captures water from the C44 basin in mostly St. Lucie County and cleans that water before returning it to the St. Lucie River and to the St. Lucie estuary. It helps prevent the damaging discharges from both the local basin as well as from Lake Okeechobee. But that's not where this project ends. And you can see pictures, the large picture down below, that's the C44 reservoir complex. And you can see how large it is. It's 2 miles by 3 miles, just the reservoir itself. And associated with that reservoir that the Corps of Engineers has under construction and is scheduled to be completed this year, the Water Management District has already constructed and finished the stormwater treatment area that's associated with that reservoir. So those stormwater treatment cells, you can see cell 5 in a picture on the slide, those are complete. They're holding water, they're growing vegetation, and they are ready to receive water and clean water. We will be cleaning water in that stormwater treatment area ahead of the reservoir. But again, that reservoir will be completed this year. Interestingly, a big reservoir like this that holds, acres and acres and billions of gallons of water, this reservoir will take about 18 months to completely fill. Interestingly, one of the most dangerous parts of building a dam, which is what this reservoir is considered, is what's called the first fill. And that's important is because you're testing all of the engineering that I see folks giving me some hand signals, and that's exactly right. Everything has to settle as this reservoir begins to be filled by water and starts to take on the load of all of that water. And so It's a very deliberate engineering effort, and so it'll take time to fill that, about 18 months, and that's true of all of our reservoirs that are being built under SERP. But ahead of the storage, that stormwater treatment area is already working for us to help clean water in this area. Also part of Indian River Lagoon South suite of projects includes 2 more sets of reservoirs and stormwater treatment areas in the C23, C24 basin and the C25 basin. And working together along with the natural lands component, this suite of projects will really work for us on the east side of the lake. You could go to the next slide for me. The second project in our Generation 1 2007 WRDA is the Picayune Strand Restoration Project. This project is on the west side. It doesn't include storage, but this is a true restoration project. And so in the image that you can see to the far left, that red hashed area, that's this project. And you can see that it's an area that is surrounded by other natural areas. Fakahatchee Strand State Preserve, 75,000 acres. Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge, 26,000 acres. Collier Seminole State Park, 6,500 acres. Big Cypress National Preserve, over 700,000 acres. 10,000 Islands National Wildlife Refuge, another 35,000 acres. And then you had a development that was planned right in the middle of all those natural areas, completely disrupting the hydrology, disrupting the wildlife corridors, damaging those ecosystems. And instead, this project restores that. It brings it all together and allows those natural areas to work together as a wonderful wildlife corridor and a hydrologically connected set of mosaics of ecosystems that work together to deliver clean water to habitats for our plants and animals in South Florida, and builds the resiliency of that entire coast. And this project is currently under construction. In that image in the center, you can see that blue area is the 20% of hydrologic restoration that's currently being achieved by the features that are already constructed and working. Importantly, there's a Southwest protection feature that just went under construction by the Corps of Engineers and will be completed in 2024. Along with that, the South Florida Water Management District and the Corps of Engineers are sequencing elements of this project in order to deliver more benefits while it's still under construction. So construction will be completed around 2024, but in the meantime, we are already plugging portions of the canals so that we can enlarge that circle of hydrologic restoration within the footprint of this project. You could go to the next slide. Under our Generation 2, these are projects that were authorized under the 2014 WRDA. And so this includes the Caloosahatchee River or C43 West Basin Storage Reservoir. So this is another very large reservoir that the South Florida Water Management District started construction on in 2015. It's projected to store about 170,000 acre feet of water annually. And this project has 19 miles of embankment. And you can see a portion of that in the image that's in the center or to the center right. On the left is one of the inflow pump stations, one of these large pump stations associated with the large reservoirs. And I wanted to show you a picture of this to understand scale of these projects. These are not small culverts that are under roadways and things like that. They're not farm pump stations. These are really large water infrastructure. And so when we talk about taking 18 months or so to do a first fill, this is why, because these projects are huge and they need to be huge to capture those 52 inches of rain that fall from the sky every year that we want to conserve, put to good use, and make sure is delivered to the natural system while also meeting the water needs of our state. And so this project is scheduled for completion in December of 2023. As you can see, it's well underway, and this project also demonstrates the capability of the South Florida Water Management District. The Water Management District is really unique in its partnership with the Corps of Engineers on SERP, not only because of the agreements that were made in the 50-50 partnership, which is unlike anything else across the nation, but the South Florida Water Management District is a very capable non-federal sponsor. A lot of other non-federal sponsors across the nation couldn't undertake an engineering effort like the C-43 reservoir. But in this case, and one of the reasons why we are able to move so many projects forward so quickly in SERP is because our agency is able to do the kind of construction that it takes to do the C-43 reservoir in concert with the Corps. So while the Corps is working on the east side of the lake, the Water Management District is working on the west side of the lake. And I'll tell you a little bit more about storage north and south of the lake in just a minute. But first, I want to go to the Biscayne Bay Coastal Wetlands Phase 1 project, which is on the next slide. This was also authorized in WRDA 2014. Oh, looks like I forgot one. Sorry about that. My apologies to Broward County. I did not mean to skip you. I just had the slides out of order in my head. And so first, let's talk about Broward County Water Preserve Area, again, authorized in 2014. And the reason that this project is important is it really highlights, as you can see in this picture, how our developed areas are right next to our natural areas. And what do we do about that? Well, we have to make sure that we're managing seepage, that we're providing flood control, and that those features are working together. And the Broward County Water Preserve Area project really captures that dynamic. It improves water quality in our water conservation area because water that is flowing off of developed areas isn't going into our natural areas. First, it's being captured, and then it's being delivered to the water supply needs as needed. And the Broward County project also is managing seepage from the water conservation areas as you'll see in a few more slides, continue to deliver some of that new water that Mr. Davis talked about as we capture more of the rainfall, store it, and move it south throughout the system. And now we'll go to Biscayne Bay Coastal Wetlands Phase 1. This project, continuing a little farther south, has three components. Deering Estates, which was completed in 2012 by the Water Management District. The L31 East Flowway at the south side of the picture, down at the bottom. That is under construction. The last contract will be awarded by the Corps of Engineers in conjunction with that flowway. All of the land has been acquired for that. And then in the center there, Cutler Wetlands, which is currently under design. That design will be complete later this year, and we will move into construction early next year for the completion of this Phase 1 of the project. We'll talk a little later about Phase 2, which has been combined with some other elements of SERP into the BB-SEER project that's currently being planned. So we'll go to the next slide. In WRDA 2018, a really large portion of SERP was authorized. And that large portion is called the Central Everglades Planning Project, or CEP. So all these acronyms get confusing, but CEP is the Central Everglades portion of SERP. And CEP includes bringing new water to the south end of the system. So what do we need to do in order to construct the storage and the conveyance features to deliver more of the water that we capture to the places that it belongs, instead of evacuating that water from Lake Okeechobee out to the northern estuaries at times when they don't want it, don't need it, and it's damaging to those northern estuaries. That's what SEP's all about. And so this slide just gives you a feel for what SEP's all about, the benefits of it, and all of these little lines and arrows and tiny structures and X's. Really, all of that is how we are modifying portions of the system in the Central Everglades, mostly in the water conservation areas and associated conveyance structures, in order to make sure that we can move the water that we're storing in the EAA reservoir, treating it in the EAA stormwater treatment area, and then conveying that more than 370,000 acre feet extra water that's currently being evacuated to the northern estuaries. We're moving that water south as we construct the SEP features. And so if you go to the next slide, the critical part of this that makes it all work is the EAA reservoir project. And so the Water Management District, under the direction of Governor DeSantis, really moved out on this project. We started construction on the stormwater treatment area while the Corps of Engineers started the design of the reservoir. And that stormwater treatment area is under construction. You can see some pictures there that show the progress. It's really moving along. I would encourage you to give us a shout and let us give you a tour of the site and show you how Everglades restoration is under construction and is moving forward rapidly. We began construction in April of 2020. We signed the pre-partnership credit agreement in May of 2020. Blasting was initiated in August, and the main STA contract was awarded at our February 2021 governing board. And that contractor is really getting the work underway so that we can start treating clean water to the Everglades as quickly as possible. And so in conjunction with that, and these are also part of SEP features, is once we have all that clean water, it's ready to move into Everglades National Park. So we doubled the conveyance, moving water from the water conservation area into the canal that allows it to spread under those bridges and into Everglades National Park through that S333 North structure. But that's what that does, is it doubles the amount of water that we can move south. The Old Tamiami Trail road removal is another portion of the blockages between the water conservation areas and Everglades National Park. That contractor started removing the road surfaces and is now working on the base of the roadway, and had to take a short hiatus during the wet season because that portion of the road was actually underwater, but now is moving forward and removing that road base. And of note, we're taking all of that material and it is being used in other projects. Some of the material is being used by the Miccosukee tribe for some of their ongoing construction. Some will be used by Everglades National Park for projects that they have associated with expanding their parking lot at the Shark Valley Visitor Center. And then some of the material is being used in the other SEP features as we fill in some of the canals that allow the water to sheet flow through some of those X's that I showed you on the previous slide, where we're filling in some canals and creating better sheet flow from the water conservation area into the park. And I have just a few more slides to show you a few of the more exciting things that are coming just recently. So in the WRDA 2020 project, The Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project was authorized, and we are working very closely with Palm Beach County and other stakeholders as we move into design of the features of this project. On the next slide, I want to talk about another project, the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Restoration Project. We were hoping that this project would be authorized in the Word of 2020, but the Corps' chief's report didn't quite get there. And we are moving out, however, with funding from the Florida legislature on the aquifer storage and recovery portion of this project. So this project incorporates storage north of Lake Okeechobee. We talked about storage east, west, and south of Lake Okeechobee. This is the project that includes storage north of the lake. And a large portion of the storage north of the lake is incorporated in aquifer storage and recovery wells. These are wells that drill into our upper Floridan aquifer and the Avon Park permeable zone, 2 aquifers. Water will be treated, stored underground, and then recovered and delivered to the natural system in order to allow better timing of water delivery. And so we are moving out on this in a very deliberate fashion, because during our pilot studies that Mr. Davis talked about, we realized that there's still some uncertainties about ASR. And we want to make sure that we understand those uncertainties, that we answer the questions still remaining about ASR, and that we move forward in a deliberate fashion so that we can employ this technology to its best use as part of the comprehensive Everglades plan. So we currently are doing what's called continuous core drilling, and that's an underground survey. And it gives us information to make sure that we understand the aquifers and that we plan the wells to be in the right place in order to store the water effectively. After those continuous cores, the next step in ASR is drilling exploratory test wells. We just approved by our governing board 2 of our sites for exploratory test well drilling. And those are the 2 sites that are marked the C38N cluster and the C38S cluster. And those are along the Kissimmee River on the north side of Lake Okeechobee. And you can see them on the map. It's awful small writing, but it's those 2 just to the right of the green blob in the middle there. And those 2 sites, we're going to put 2 wells at each of those sites, and that will help us understand things like pressure in the aquifer, how long it takes for water to recover into those wells when we pump it out, and helps us facilitate the design of what we hope will be 10 well clusters at each of those sites. If you could go to the next slide. I'd also like to tell you about a few projects that are in the planning phase. The Western Everglades Restoration Project. This project is really important to both the Miccosukee and the Seminole tribes. This project is in the Western Everglades. It works in order to restore the hydrology of the Big Cypress National Preserve and make sure that we maintain the water supplies for the tribes, as well as improve the water quality of the water being delivered to the Water Conservation Area 3, to the tribes, and to the Big Cypress National Preserve, allowing, again, a hydrologic connection between the Central Everglades and the Western Everglades. This project is currently on hold with the Corps of Engineers. They need a waiver in order to continue working on this project because they have exceeded the time and funding limits that they had set for this project. And so we and a host of stakeholders are working in concert with the Corps in order to continue to move this project forward. as we move forward with that project, we are looking at trying to implement some of the project features on the far south end of the Western Everglades in order to allow some of the hydrologic connection ahead of the full implementation of that project. And so the Water Management District is working closely with stakeholders and with the tribes and with the Corps in order to try and move some of those elements forward more quickly. Another project that we have under the planning phase is referenced as BB-SEER, and it is a combination of phase 2 of the Biscayne Bay Coastal Wetlands Project and also the C-111 Spreader Canal Eastern project. And so we combine those elements, and this is to deliver a better hydrologic connection to Biscayne Bay, delivering more fresh water needed to Biscayne Bay, and making sure that the timing is correct for delivering that fresh water to Biscayne Bay. And so this will restore ecological conditions in the model lands, the southern glades, and portions of Everglades National Park, as well as the coastal wetlands. It restores conditions in that near shore zone of Biscayne Bay, including Biscayne National Park, Card Sound, Barnes Sound, and Manatee Bay, and increases resiliency of coastal habitats in southeastern Miami-Dade County to sea level change. And so all of those are really important for our coastal habitats, our coastal wetlands, the freshwater wetlands inland from the coast, and creating those salinity conditions for all of those habitats. And that project is currently in the planning phase, and so those PDTs are ongoing, and I know many of you have been participating in those PDT meetings. Finally, the last project that is in planning and envisioned on the IDS is the Southern Everglades project. And this project will encompass the remaining portions of those 68 components that Mr. Davis talked about earlier, and help us to really deliver the remaining freshwater needs of our ecosystems on the southern end of the system. And that's important because it's what helps us stitch everything all together as we look at not just the project features, but the operations of how we put all of these different structures and operating components together in order to deliver water to its ultimate source of need, which is on my last slide. If you could go one more, to Florida Bay. And so all of these projects work together to help us deliver the quantity, quality, timing, and distribution of water to all of those ecosystems that we talked about, finally terminating in Florida Bay. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share all of these exciting projects with you, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. We really appreciate that. It was very informative. And we'd like to definitely offer the opportunity for questions. But before I do that, let me also indicate that we have Jennifer Leeds, I believe she's on, who is a bureau chief, the bureau chief of the Ecosystem Restoration Planning and Coordination Group at South Florida Water Management. She joined Water Management District in 1997 and has been involved in Everglades restoration efforts for 24 years. So Jennifer, welcome to both Jennifers. And so now we'll have time for some questions for her or Mike. Or Michael Davis. For Jennifer's, both Jennifers, and for Michael Davis. So are there any questions? Chair Bailey.
First, I want to thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds, for this. It was very informative, very exciting presentation. Just looking forward to all of it being completed. you're definitely doing God's work. So first I want to say that. My question is regarding the reservoir, this storage. When you talk about a lot of the treatment, could you just briefly overview what's the process like for cleaning the water before it's being released back into like the canals and the Everglades for the reservoirs, and also for that of Lake Jupiter, if anything's been done there also?
Sure. With all of the reservoirs that we are constructing, we are including water quality components that help make sure that the water that's being delivered back to the natural system is cleaner than when it came into the reservoirs. And so for the most part, we are doing that with stormwater treatment areas, and these are constructed wetlands that work to the plants uptake the nutrients and use those nutrients in a natural way that help make sure that the water that's leaving those stormwater treatment areas is cleaner than when it comes in. The exception is the reservoir on the west side. So the Caloosahatchee Reservoir, stormwater treatment areas are particularly effective in removing phosphorus. On the Caloosahatchee side, the nutrient that we need to pay more attention to for the Caloosahatchee estuary is nitrogen. And so we're looking at a different treatment train in order to make sure that we're addressing nitrogen in that reservoir and for that system. And so we undertook a water quality feasibility study to determine what would be the best treatment train in order to address those water quality issues. And so we are currently in that phase of designing those components. And so I'll be able to provide more information about that in the coming months in terms of what we're actually looking at employing there. And so that feasibility study is also underway and is a very public process. We have PDTs meeting, and we've been doing public meetings about that. We're looking at doing a combination of natural and chemical treatment in order to address the nitrogen in particular. And so alum is very effective in removing nitrogen from water. And so we're looking at an inline alum treatment in combination with the reservoir, and then a treatment train following its release from the reservoir that might include some kind of constructed wetlands as a sort of polishing cell before we return it to the natural system. And so that's the spoiler alert of what we'll be presenting at future public meetings.
Thank you.
I have, there's a question in the chat. What exactly will be treated for and not treated for before water goes into the aquifer zone via the ASRs?
So I'm going to get out of my technical element here very quickly, but what we are looking at and what we are working with our technical experts on is making sure that we meet all of the regulatory requirements for water standards for injecting water into the aquifer. And so there are primary and secondary drinking water standards that there are different elements that have to do with micro level contaminants, as well as particulate matter and chemical elements that have to be removed from the water before it can be injected. And so those are in line with both EPA's and the state of Florida's drinking water standards. And so we are looking at treating that water through, again, we're looking at feasibility of different types of treatment trains in order to choose the one that is most effective at the most reasonable cost. And so we are looking at doing some proof of concept studies with some different vendors and different technologies this summer and early fall, so that we can choose the best technology ahead of actually doing any injection.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions in the chat. The follow-up note, any treatment for nutrients in that injecting?
We don't plan on treating specifically for nutrients. However, much of the technologies will significantly improve nutrient removal as well.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to ask.
I do have a question. Actually, just staying with the ASRs for a moment. What kind of a timeline are we looking at for the proof of concept pilot projects that are currently planned?
So we're looking at implementing ASR in a phased fashion. And so we're starting with the 2 test wells at the 2 sites that I mentioned earlier. And those take about a year or so to drill each of those wells. These are large wells. They're not like the 6-inch continuous cores that we do for sampling work. These are 36-inch wells. So at the surface level, in order to do the casing, you're talking over 50 inches a hole in the ground in order to put casing in and make sure that those wells are going in properly. So one well will be in the upper Floridan aquifer, the other well will be in the Avon Park permeable zone. So it takes about a year to drill those wells, and then there's a year of testing that's associated with that. We might be able to do it a little bit quicker than that. We're working with the contractor on the schedule now, and some of that information will arrive sooner than others. And so the timing's a little uncertain, but we're looking at probably an 18 to 24 month implementation for this portion. We might be able to do some other wells concurrently with that, depending on the initial science evaluation of the first wells that we put in. Following that, I mentioned that we'll be looking at proof of concept for treatment technologies this summer, early fall. That will allow us to combine that information with the information that we receive from the exploratory wells in order to inform our design before we move into the next phase of actually implementing a full cluster. Once we are able to design and construct a cluster, then we'll be able to do cycle testing of that cluster, which will help us really understand the viability of ASR in a more expanded fashion. And so if everything goes well and all the things prove to go well, we could look at having a very significant portion implemented by 2027 to 2030.
Okay, thank you for that. So Mr. Davis gave us a great perspective, lining up the 68 elements, I think, as what's been referred to as SERP. And so one of the questions that comes to mind is, so how long to finish and how much will it cost?
A nice, easy question.
I think that's the colonel's question, I think.
I was going to let Mr. Davis answer that question if he was going to. So
before my grandson has kids, okay, or grandkids, maybe we'll be done. So.
Yeah, so right now the integrated delivery schedule goes out to 2030, but it doesn't include some of those projects that are still under the study phase, right? We're still planning some of those projects, BBC or Western Everglades, the Southern Everglades project. Those projects aren't even on the integrated delivery schedule. So we know that the construction will move out past 2030, probably at least another decade past that in order to get all of the projects authorized. But really, the timeline depends on funding. Right now, the integrated delivery schedule, we built it so that it could demonstrate just how significant of an investment it takes to move projects at the speed that they could be implemented. That investment is looking at over $800 million a year for the next 5 years. That's a huge investment that has never been realized in Everglades restoration in its past 20 years. And the levels of investment that we have right now are much greater than what we've seen in the previous 18 years. And so really how long this takes depends on how much is invested on an annual basis.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for a good answer to a very hard question. I appreciate that. I do indeed. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I think that completes the questions, and we really do appreciate both presentations. Wow, they have been, that's a powerful combination, by the way. We need to take that show on the road and get that word out to encourage consistent funding and increasing funding as we go along. So thank you again, both Colonel Reynolds and also Mr. Michael Davis. We definitely appreciate that. Okay, next on the agenda is the Central and Southern Florida Flood Project Risk Management Infrastructure Resiliency Plan Study. And I said that all in one breath. I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Geller to do the introductions on this one.
Thank you, sir. As everybody knows, large parts of South Florida were carved out of the Everglades. I don't know if most of you realize that we're about to return to the Everglades unless we're able to do something about that. We get a lot of rain. The rain drains through the drainage canals and thence to the ocean, which works fine as long as the water in the west is higher than the water in the ocean. But as the water in the oceans are rising, we are at risk of overtopping our existing flood control structures, which, as I said, would return the western portion of all of our counties to the Everglades. Somebody who's going to speak on that is really an amazing individual. Dr. Jennifer Jurado is the Chief Resilience Officer for Broward County and Deputy Director of the Environmental Protection and Growth Management Department. She's really the god of water here, whether we're talking about the oceans, the Everglades, the aquifers. Her knowledge of water is just absolutely amazing. And although nobody is irreplaceable in any organization, I would hate to see what would happen if we lost her. So let me introduce to you now Dr. Jennifer Jurado, the Chief Resilience Officer of Broward County.
Thank you, Mayor Geller. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Thanks very much. And well, I appreciate the kind introduction, but clearly on an agenda with the individuals who preceded me, it's a really powerful group, and I'm humbled to be the third Jennifer. Hardly ever happens except for when I was maybe in 6th grade, so it's funny that we all ended up on the program today. But I really do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Isabel, for the invitation to present. This is an incredibly hot topic for us in Broward County and for the entire region. And it fits very well with the presentations that preceded, that provided a great deal of context. And I hope with the conversation today that we'll be able to enlist the support of not only the councils, but the individuals who make up the councils in really helping to push hard on this project that's really critical for our well-being. And I hope the picture isn't quite as dire as Mayor Geller shared, but it is certainly not a pretty one if we don't have this addressed very quickly. So I'll be providing some context, talk about the details of what's needed, what's at risk, and some of the strategy, as well as our recent advocacy and some of the challenges that we've run into. So I will be covering the Central South Florida Flood Control Project that we lovingly refer to as the CNSF project, and the need for a resilience study for this system. Working to advance my slides. Let me see. We went through this with Isabel. There we go. Okay, so as a bit of the overview, and I think you've seen variations of this image in the presentations again earlier this morning. But the Central South Florida Flood Control Project is really this large system of canals that and control structures and gates that extends from just north of Lake Okeechobee all the way down south. It's responsible for the extensive drainage of the Everglades, and of course is a major focus for the restoration efforts. But it's also what has allowed the development of the communities that exist in the south part of Florida, especially along the southeast coast, and is not only fundamental to drainage and flood control operations, but is critical to the protection and preservation of water supplies, as well as environmental deliveries, as has already been shared. And so this is a system that we demand quite a bit from. Now, as important as it is a system that is now about 70 years old. When it was designed and construction initiated, this was back in the 1940s, and it was clearly a very different environment. Today, there are more than 1,000 miles of levees, 720 miles of canals, and several hundred water control structures. This system was designed to serve a community of about 2 million residents. That was the projection. Today, we have more than 11 million throughout the region, and this population is expected to continue to grow to service a community of 15 million, with increasing demands for drainage and flood protection, water supply, and meeting the needs of Everglades delivery. Of course, a lot has changed in addition to the population. The landscape is significantly different, built out in an entirely different way. But we've also seen major environmental changes relating to rainfall intensification, where I'm sure many are familiar with these very extreme rainfall events that can satisfy 1 in 1,000 year conditions, delivering more than 20 inches of rain and in a day on rare occasion, but still happening. So it's a conveyance network that largely did not anticipate that type of deluge and what would be needed to move that amount of water, in addition to moving it while we protect people, assets, and agricultural fields, etc. We have, of course, the challenge of rising seas, which Mayor Geller referenced, and which will be highlighted in some of the graphics. And so we have substantial strain in terms of the ability to meet drainage and flood control, conveyance, and discharge needs. And at the same time, I think it's really important to note that with all the investments in Everglades restoration, this really is the backbone of the system. This is what is needed in order to convey the water. It's a system that's being modified in order to improve those water deliveries. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that the National Academy of Sciences that is convened for triannual reviews of Everglades restoration has once, but not twice, stated the need to account for future conditions as part of the Everglades restoration strategy, seeking synergies with what's happening with resilience planning in our urban communities, and has recognized as well that there is a dramatic need to improve this system to account for future conditions, not only the changes in landscape that have already occurred, but those that are forthcoming. And so I think that the most revealing of needs that related to the system was first identified by the South Florida Water Management District. I mean, in addition to all the Everglades restoration initiatives, but I'm really talking about the resilience needs related to a water management district analysis in 2009. And this report, which was, undertaken internally, revealed that there are 18 salinity control structures, or these gates that sit on the terminal ends of these canals, that were stated to be within 6 inches of their design capacity, meaning that there had been enough in the way of sea level rise since the system was originally designed and constructed that capacity had been lost, and that with an additional 6 inches of rise, you would no longer be able to operate these gates in the way that was intended for drainage and flood control purposes, and there were already limitations that were being observed. And the majority of these structures, as shown in red, are located in the Southeast Florida area, including the counties of Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. So, of course, we're now in the year 21, so we're nearly 11 years ago that the study was undertaken before it was published. And so what are the implications of this? And I've got a couple of graphics that I hope help reveal the circumstance. The graphic on the left here is of Miami-Dade, and I just want to note that there are a couple of distinctions. I don't have a separate graphic for Palm Beach, but I'm noting that in Miami-Dade, for example, the control gates are located much more proximate to the coast than in Broward County. In Miami-Dade County, you can see then that there is, as a result, there will be a larger area, proportion of the total area that sits on the landward side of these gates. And so really you have all the drainage and flood control for the county that is constrained or managed by what happens at these gates that sit very, very close to the coastal waters. You can see examples of what these canals and the large gates look like, and as Mayor Geller indicated, you can see very clearly in the graphic on the bottom that the water on the landward side is sitting several feet higher than the discharge, and so when these gates open, you rely upon gravity for the most part for water to move and for the drainage and flood protection to occur. And we'll see the implications of what occurs when that isn't the circumstance. Sorry, there's a little bit of delay with the slide change. So the graphic on the left here was produced by the South Florida Water Management District. It was really originally developed as an animation, but it does show an example of how on the landward side you have this gate separating the coastal side, and when it rains, you need to be able to open up that gate and allow that water to spill out. But as water rises on the ocean side, you wouldn't be able to open that gate without the salty water spilling back in. And so what happens, and what has already happened, is that during the extreme high tide events that we're already experiencing, it can be raining quite severely with flooding taking place, and residents will be calling in amazement because there's no discharge occurring, and the response has to be, well, we can't open those gates and provide that discharge until the high tide recedes. And so the issue is not only are we losing the capacity now in these during intervals of high tides, but again with the persistent increase in water level, you end up with a situation in which those gates won't be able to open at all unless the system is modified, and quite likely it means not opening the gates, but rather having pumps that will move water over the gates, because our ability to maintain gravity operations will be eroded. In Broward County, and we can see on the graphic on the right, The red boxes show the locations of the salinity control structures in our county. And you can see we have several structures that are located far more inland than what we see in Miami-Dade County. In fact, some of these structures are as far as 7 miles inland. And this is, or excuse me, 6 miles. And this is an important point to make because the location of these gates isn't necessarily fixed in time. Now, as far west as those gates are located, it means that more of the community ends up having a waterway access, and clearly that's an important feature. But as we look at changes in sea level and our need to protect our water supplies, those gates are also critical in terms of keeping salt water from penetrating further west. We may find that we need to reevaluate the position of the collection of some of these gates because of the exposures that we have in terms of our water supply. And in a county like Broward County, where many of our gates are located further westward, that could be something that weighs heavy in the evaluation. I also want to share that here we have a couple of examples of the upstream and downstream water levels at 2 particular gates. So at the S36, the upstream water elevation is shown in blue, and the downstream elevation is shown in red. And so you can see that there is indeed a separation in, let's call it elevation or height, that allows that water to spill from one elevation to another. At the S13, that isn't the case. Here we have a much lower topography. We are unable to maintain that higher water elevation upstream, because if we did, it would cause flooding. And this is another point to be raised, is that we can't just simply start to hold back water levels at a higher level. We're already maximizing what that system can deliver for protection of our water supply. If we start to hold water levels, we start to change the conditions under which all the rest of that drainage infrastructure was developed on the west side of these gates. And so in most instances, there's no additional flexibility. And you can see at the S13, because the water levels are essentially flat on one side of the gate versus the other, and this is one of the areas of our most extreme saltwater intrusion, here we have a pump, a relatively small pump that operates over the gate. And I do want to share that the USGS has conducted work in this area and demonstrated that we would have to maintain that existing pump at 24-hour operations just to keep up with current groundwater elevations under modeled sea level rise. So the infrastructure there isn't designed to operate at the levels at which it would need to be moving forward. So even where we have some pumps in place, and this is the only one we have in Broward County, and there's only been a couple of, maybe at least one, perhaps one more retrofit in Miami-Dade, but most of these gates are gravity control. And that's the point being that even where we have pumps, they're still exposed. So I just wanted to highlight here, and I'll show a graphic in a moment, which is the planning for sea level rise scenario. But we do talk about acceleration and sea level rise, and for very, very technical people like our Army Corps staff, there may be, and leadership, there may be you know, some debate about how accurate the numbers are, but they're solid enough for this example. And if we just look at averages that are referenced and measured for sea level rise over, let's start back in 1900, we had, you know, about 10 inches over this 100-year time frame, which would be about 1 inch every 11 years, or 9 inches we had in that time frame. If we look more recently, from 1992 to 2015, the global average was about 3 inches of sea level rise in that 23-year time frame. So now we've seen about 1 inch of rise being realized in just over 7.5 years. More recently, if we look at 2000 from 2017, in that 17-year time frame, it's about 1 inch in just over 4 years. So you can see clearly over the last 100 years that we need fewer years in order to achieve the 1 inch of rise, and now we're down to just over 4 years. Now remember that that report by the South Florida Water Management District was issued in 2009, and we have seen a little over, there are estimates of 3 to 5 inches of sea level rise in that time frame. And there's other factors that weigh in. So some of that rise may not be permanent, but the trend is what the trend is. And that's what we need to be anticipating and recognizing, that time is not our friend in this scenario. And every year that we lose in trying to see this project expedited is an erosion of our flood protection capacity. And it's not just projected. We had Colonel Kelly from Jacksonville, who spoke to the Water Advisory Board, the Broward County Water Advisory Board, just about 2 weeks ago. And he was asked specifically about the timing of the exposure, and he said it's now. He didn't say it was in 10 or 20 years, it's today. Here's a gate. This is located in Miami-Dade. This gate, the photo and the images from a South Florida Water Management District presentation, but this shows the gate in the closed position. The water on the left-hand side is tide, it's salty water. The water on the right-hand side is fresh water in the canal. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of, no ability to open the gate. The gate is closed. The water is on a higher elevation on the coastal side, and it's pouring in. Not only does it limit flood protection, but when you have overtopping of these gates, you're also bringing salty water into an area where we're trying to protect our fresh water supplies, and trying to purge salt water after overtopping events is a very lengthy process as well. The graphic that I provide here is one speaking again to that issue of saltwater intrusion. And it is a graphic that shows the progression of that front with time. The blue line shows the historical location of the front in 2009. This is within the aquifer, the yellow line in 2014, and the red line in 2019. We've seen, I think you can see, substantial movement. We've actually seen the progression of the front beyond our salinity control structures, which is quite problematic. And the series of maps here show the total square miles of the Biscayne aquifer where we now measure salty water that can no longer be used to support potable water supply needs. Again, underscoring that it isn't just about balancing drainage and flood protection, but we really need to evaluate the system for water supply as well. So we've talked about sea level rise. I think many are already familiar with the regional planning graphic, but this is the most recent sea level rise projection developed by the partnership of the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact. We advocate for and essentially use 50-year planning projection for all regional investments. We would suggest that the Central South Florida Flood Control Project is clearly a 70-year-old system, so even a 50-year planning horizon would not, in our opinion, be sufficient for this study. But just for reference, we're anticipating and planning for a total of 40 inches of sea level rise by 2070 relative to 2000, well beyond the 6 inches that were referenced in the report. And we have to consider everything that's required in terms of an evaluation of a project like this. Not only is it the multi-year studies that are required, but it's the congressional appropriations for recommendations that come from the studies. It's the design, the permitting, the construction, potential land acquisition if that were part of the necessary improvements. And the point being that this isn't something that's just executed in its entirety in 10 years. And the fact that it's been more than 10 years since this study is critical time that was actually needed in order to advance what you can see, I hope, to be a very dire need. And so we didn't just receive the report and then have sat back quietly wondering when the project will be addressed. We've been actually working, I think, fairly aggressively over the last 10 years, but more specifically in the last 5 years, to try to bring the necessary attention and partnership to the project, including the engagement of the Army Corps of Engineers, the South Florida Water Management District and legislative members, the business community, the regional planning councils, the compact partners themselves have all been very, I want to say, helpful and critical partners in the conversation. And I don't think that there's a single entity that's been named that doesn't see the urgency of the need. And yet we've not been successful in making significant headway. We have been very engaged with the Army Corps of Engineers. The business community has been a partner in a lot of the correspondence. And I want to say that the frustration has been that year after year, certain avenues for funding for the study have been flagged. We've had reassurances that these are, it's an initiative that weighs heavy with the Corps, that leadership is supportive, and that there are all the, new opportunity after new opportunity of which we should avail ourselves. And some of these references may not be entirely, the vernacular that's used, but in the form of continuing resolutions, disaster recovery funding that's been associated with tropical storm and hurricane after another, various supplemental processes, all have been, stated to be the avenue that's going to make the difference in a given year. And year after year, the project continues to be excluded from every one of those funding decisions. We've had endless visits with congressional members, joint advocacy with Army Corps headquarters, Office of Management and Budget. We've been in the office, I think, of every legislator, and most recently we're fairly convinced that the opportunity was ours with regards to this last Army Corps work plan. And in this last Army Corps work plan, there was an opportunity to see 8 new starts authorized. We were told at one point in time that this project did not require, the study did not require a new start. Then last year, it was now determined that it did require a new start. So with that determination and 8 new starts being provided for as part of the Army Corps work plan, and this study, as we were assured, met every one of the categories in which new starts could be supported. And we, again, the same letter writing campaign, the Water Management District was on board as the local sponsor. The Army Corps of Engineers had already advanced its initial appraisal report. Everything was in place, and then 3 weeks ago, we see the work plan, and once again, the project was not included. And so it has been a year after year of annual disappointments and rethinking, what are we not doing right in the strategy? But as I said, there has been progress that's been made, and I think that all agree that we could be no better positioned. There are no exercises left except for to see this new start awarded and the funding appropriated. The Army Corps of Engineers did complete the initial appraisal report. It was transmitted, it was approved. The South Florida Water Management District last year and this year have written letters of commitment restating their enthusiasm and preparation to serve as a local partner, providing the necessary 50% cost share that's required in that project. And the Corps has indicated to us that that's the most significant statement that they need. We know that the reference to this project needs to be one of not only providing that new start, but ensuring that we end up with a study that leads to construction. We don't want a study that leads to another study, but I do want to share that we understand from the Army Corps and from all the partners that this is apt to be a larger study than what we would have funded initially. But the Corps has stated that starting with a $6 million kind of initial priority phase 1 study, that this would allow them to focus on the most critical needs, which are these structures, and to begin to immediately prioritize and then to continue to start working on the design and the permitting while the rest of this large study can follow. So there may be more elements that are more about the conveyance network and other aspects of the system, but to begin immediate work on that gate, on those series of gates, and that evaluation and how those need to be rectified, we're talking about a mere $6 million and that new start designation. And I reference here the 216 study because Colonel Kelly indicated that that opportunity for them is provided through this section 216. So if you hear it and if anybody uses it, it would be a 216 study. It's a resilience study for the Central South Florida Flood Control Project with recommendations that lead to construction. Since all these efforts, most recently, Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade counties have all adopted resolutions and transmitted to all of our congressional members the request for that New Start and funding in the 22 work plan. We would be appreciative of similar resolutions that could be executed jointly or individually by the councils and their members. And I would say that the one thing that I think that we have appreciated is I think that we had two strong of assurances that the virtues of the project were so well recognized and shared that the communications that we were having were sufficient. So clearly they were not. We appreciate the great need for our state leadership, our representatives. They need to be aware of this need and the request and communicating alongside us with our congressional members. We need, all of our elected leadership and our councils and our business community that has been engaged, but all need to be. We would kindly request that same level of engagement with our congressional members and ensure that we do not have yet a failed attempt again this year, and that this year is the opportunity to see this initiated. The summary of everything that I've said is provided here, and I guess the one last thing that I would acknowledge is that just as Everglades Restoration took the commitment and dedication of an entire region and the state and the critical partnerships, I think that this project is just the same. Just as the C-51 reservoir that many of us worked on required 15 years of engagement, this is the same. Just as the Lake Okeechobee Herbert Hoover Dike restoration required engagement, persistence, and leadership, this is the same. And I do hope that we see the swell of support needed on this project as we've been the beneficiaries of on all these other regional initiatives, recognizing that we really are out of time, and it's a system that we all rely upon, and one or two voices is not sufficient. We do need the collective region. And thank you for the opportunity to share the presentation, and look forward to any ways in which I can provide support moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gerardo. Mayor Geller, did you wish to add anything before we go to questions and answers?
Yes, I just wanted to say I'm depressed again, which is what I hear. And when Colonel Kelly spoke to us a couple of weeks ago, I believe he indicated that he thought there was a good chance, but I think he also said that there were approximately, and Dr. Gerardo can probably give these numbers better than I can, but that he thought that there would be perhaps 80 to 100 projects that would qualify, and I believe it was 6 to 10 that would actually be funded. I may be off on those numbers, but I'm not off on the order of magnitude. So I'm depressed, and we need to work on this because, again, I believe, knowing how long it's going to take to get everything done, it's almost too late to do anything to prevent flooding. We have to move immediately to prevent catastrophic flooding. Dr. Gerardo, what were those numbers that Dr. Kelly said?
Yeah, I would have to pull them up as well, but I think that you're right that the order, I believe that he said that there would be several dozen that would probably be strong contenders, but you're right, the total submittal, close to 80 to 100 with maybe 30 or so that would be really strong contenders. And so the competition is steep. And to your question that you had asked him was a 10-year timeline, realistic? And he said that it was incredibly ambitious, not impossible, but it would require, we have something real to work towards. It's not as if it can't be done, but it won't be an easy lift.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions?
I'm not seeing any, and I think just for discussion, if I might, we have in your packets a proposed joint resolution because we don't have a quorum physically present in a geographic location altogether. We can only discuss this, but the plan would be to for each of the councils to bring a resolution in front of our own councils at our next meeting. So ours, actually both of which happen in April, to hopefully adopt this resolution. And then in the meantime, each of the executive directors can send a supportive letter to relevant parties about the content of this. But if anybody has any input or adjustments that they'd like to make to that resolution, this would be a great time to bring those up. And I guess maybe we should let's just hit the high points of, I've lost my pen. The high points of after all the whereases, which basically lay out what the tale of woe there and how how serious this is. The action items with that are calling for the Congress to allow the Army Corps of Engineers to begin an adequate number of New START studies in the investigations account for flood and storm damage reduction. That the Congress provide sufficient funding to the Army Corps of Engineers in the budget to conduct the Central and South Florida Flood Resiliency Study, and that the Army Corps of Engineers select that study as a new study and provide it with appropriate funding in their FY 2022 work plan for the Army Civil Works program. So it's a very focused request, which would hopefully turn into the right action to get this done. That's all I have.
So if anyone has any suggestions as to that particular proposed resolution, either now or before our next individual regional planning council meetings, would be a good time to make those known. And I can sense the frustration. Urgency doesn't come much clearer. Hopefully this will push it over the top.
So Jeff, it's Michael Davis. I would encourage some expediency here. I don't know if we can wait or should wait to the next councils. As President Biden's formulating his budget right now and will be submitting it to Congress at some point, I think now is the time to engage OMB again and the Biden administration, because I think all the previous engagements were with the Trump administration. And so given the emphasis on resiliency and sustainability in the Biden administration, I think you're going to see things like that reflected in his budget. So I would encourage us to consider moving a little faster and getting that to Ron Klain, for example, Chief of Staff to President Biden, and others, since we don't have an OMB director confirmed by the Senate yet, maybe move out a little bit faster, but that's just an observation.
Chair Bailey?
Mr. Chairman, would you allow our attorney to speak while we can't move faster regarding this particular meeting, because we're all video conferencing, and you need a certain physical amount to be present for quorum, and so we can't take it. If you just allow our attorney to just briefly speak while we can't take action at the moment, but we can at our next meeting.
Absolutely. David?
Yes, thank you. Pardon me. So two things. First of all, this meeting was noticed and advertised as a workshop meeting. It was not advertised as a regular or special meeting where action can be taken. Second, under the current status of state law, you have to have at least 1/3 of the quorum present physically in the room, and then you can constitute the remainder of the quorum virtually for a regional planning council, but we don't even have that today. So we are not structured today to take any action at this meeting. So whether we wait until our next regularly scheduled meeting or figure out a way to convene a special meeting that where a quorum is present. I know that sounds easier than it may actually be. That may be challenging given the regional nature of these organizations, but those are really the only two options we have to take action.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Keith.
Two points I'd like to make on that, and then we'll get you, Isabel. Thank you, Keith. The first is there's nothing to prevent myself and Isabel as the executive directors of our regional planning councils from sending correspondence supporting these ideas. I don't think I'm going out on a limb when saying that the ability to provide flood protection and protect our drinking water supplies from salinity, that both of those issues are clearly within the realm of our strategic regional policy plan, and is something that, you know, we can take a position on as staff without a vote by my council. That's already covered in the SRPP. So that's number one. Number two, everyone on this call as individual persons, and then also as your individual elected seats that you hold, this may be an issue that you think is of significance for your own individual jurisdiction, and you certainly can raise this concern with the necessary parties. I think the resolution gives you a nice suite of talking points and relevancy points and focus for that to pursue. And then I think our April adoption of the joint resolutions is just sort of a backup behind that. The ground will already be softened by those individual comments, and I think Michael Davis's point is very well made with the budget being drafted. And then if I might go out on a little bit of a limb here for a moment, there is an enormous amount of money coming down to our local governments from the federal government, $1.2 trillion, $1.9 trillion, and you know, we're used to talking about you know, $1 million is a lot of money, $1 billion is a lot of money, $1 trillion is a lot of money, and so there may be opportunities. You know, these are civic works projects that put a lot of people to work. There may be opportunities to direct some funds to help speed the conversation along. I know usually when somebody comes to you and they want you to do something, okay, you know, that's one thing. When they come to you with a little bit of money in hand and an urgent need, maybe that's something even better. So anyway, thank you for that. Let me see. That's what we're doing. So.
Okay, well, that sounds like action rather than sitting back and watching the flag rise. So that is certainly, unfortunately, the best I think we can do at this particular moment in time. But thank you, Michael, for pushing that.
Yeah, you know, make those calls. Isabel and I will send the letters, right? And, we'll see what we can do.
We can do a lot. We can do a lot.
We can do a lot. Yep.
We can do a lot. I wouldn't, and then we'll do a lot and then follow up with an executed resolution. But there's certainly a lot that we can do, especially with our board members. So
that's great. Okay, thank you all very much. I appreciate the presentation. Dr. Gerardo, Mayor Geller, thank you very much for bringing this up and bringing us that resolution. We'll definitely get in front of our respective regional planning councils in April. And we have some interim action to keep that initiative moving forward. So again, thank you for that. The next agenda item is septic to sewer conversion, a community-wide approach. And we will have a presentation by Donna Roden, who is a Special Assistant to the Chief Assistant City Manager for the City of Port St. Lucie. She's accompanied by Bradley Masek, who is the Utility Systems Director of the City of Port St. Lucie. So let's welcome Donna, and I will turn the floor over to you.
I will be a presenter here in a moment.
Okay.
Just a moment, I'm trying to share my screen. And I'm having difficulty, of course. Liz, can you remind me how to do this?
Hi there, this is Jessica Seymour. If you don't mind, there's a button at the bottom that says screen, and that will prompt you to
there you
share
go.
your screen. And if
There you
not, I
go.
can pull it up.
Nope, I've got it now. Can you all see it?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, awesome. One moment, come on. There we go. Well, thank you very much for inviting us to make a presentation. And today I'll be speaking on what we say is growing a safer and healthier Port St. Lucie, or also connect to protect. So in the beginning, it was all about a master developer, General Development Corporation, and its sister, General Development Utilities. And of course, being a large land developer, their utility customer growth was strictly driven by that utility. They expanded into select neighborhoods where they wanted particularly to sell homes. Thus, they were able to limit their service areas. They used small package treatment plants. They had a very, very limited maintenance program. And during that period of time, because the city was growing, there were several thousand homes that were built with private wells and private septic systems. Again, those were into areas where GDU and GDC had not extended the utility. And all was going along quite well. Port St. Lucie was growing. And then suddenly in 1990, the GDC-GDU empire filed bankruptcy. Consequently, the assets of the utility transferred to St. Lucie County under a quick take process, and they owned and operated the utility from 1990 to 1994, again following the same maintenance program, which was very limited. In particular, they did not expand any of their wells. The transfer then to the city occurred in 1994. The customer base, as you see at that time, there were 17,000 water connections, and over today, at the end of February, we had more than 80,000 water connections. At the point of transfer, there were just over 10,000 sewer customers, but today there is over 62,000, really pushing the 63,000 mark, or nearly a 600% growth. And the city actions that occurred that helped spur on that growth were right before actually acquiring the utility. We adopted a master plan for both water and sewer. They began to develop plans to expand the utility. which included Floridan wells rather than the shallow aquifer wells that GDU had relied on. We looked at additional water treatment and storage facilities. The same is true for wastewater treatment plants, either expanding or replacing those plants. They looked very seriously at extending the water and sewer lines throughout the entire city to be funded by property assessments. One of the first things they did was to subdivide the city into multiple areas. It sort of looks like a quilt here. The area that we refer to as the Torino area was partially developed. The GDC had not extended any water or sewer lines to much extent. They had put in the streets and only partially installed that water and sewer infrastructure. Consequently, homes could not be built in that area. Property owners were constantly coming to the city wanting to be able to pull building permits, so that seemed the likely area to start with our assessment program. It was known as Special Assessment District 1, Phase 1, followed by Phase 2. Now, before any of that construction could actually begin, there were multiple lawsuits filed going all the way to the Florida Supreme Court. The city continued to win those suits, and they did begin the construction then in 1997. One of the things that came out of those lawsuits was the fact that the nomenclature for those districts was changed from SAD to utility service area. So we had then areas 3 and 4, followed by 5, 6, 7A, 8, and then the last one being 9. And the construction for each one of those phases of water and sewer line extensions in total lasted right at 10 years from beginning to end. Other city actions and policies that prompted growth, the city determined that, and this is following along with statute and Florida Administrative Code, all new construction must connect to the city's utility system if it is available. We did go to DEP and seek a variance so that things would be a little easier for the existing homeowners, not just property owners, but homeowners. We've continued to operate under that variance pretty much, such that there were no mandatory connections for existing homes unless their well fails or becomes contaminated or their septic drain field fails. Water pumps and pressure tanks can still be replaced. They can continue to use wells for irrigation and other outside or outdoor activities. And the septic tanks can be pumped out. Other policies, this is probably the most popular program that we have at the city, and that is our 10-year interest-free connection fee payment plan. It applies only to residential properties for 10 years. It applies to their capacity fees and the installation of their wastewater grinder system. The total fees are simply divided into 120 equal monthly payments. Right now, that is $48.74 per month that is added to their monthly water and sewer bill. Commercial properties, when they convert from septic or even well, they do have a 1-year interest-free program for their capacity fees. And the reason it only applies to the capacity fees is the city does not do those installations. Those installations are performed by private contractors. We do have a residential septic pump out program, another popular program. Once a property owner has applied for service for a sewer conversion, the city will pump out that tank until we are able to complete the connection. Now, over the last many years, 22 years, we have averaged 402 septic to sewer conversions annually. In total, there have been 8,994 residential sewer conversions that have taken place. Now, the environmental benefits of that have been the 8,994 septic to sewer conversions means that plus or minus 55,313 pounds of nitrogen are prevented from entering the lagoon annually. There's been another 26,404 low pressure grinder or step system connections made to new homes, and about 27,000 gravity systems. Now that's the old original GDU plus all of that new development that's taking place west part of the city. Combined, that means over 380,000 pounds of nitrogen is prevented from entering the lagoon annually, based on the citywide sewer connections. Despite all of those conversions, and I mean, it's phenomenal that we've done nearly 9,000, but despite that, there's still nearly 15,000 that are active here in the city. And of course, with every flush of a toilet or a sink being drained, etc., that effluent is making its way into the local groundwater table. Where are they located? Well, inside the city, there are 4,500 that are within 50 feet of a water body that ultimately leads to the river. That could be a canal, a drainage right-of-way, something that is connected to the city's drainage system that ultimately discharges into the river. Another 10,000 are farther than 50 feet from the river. We looked at some areas called hotspots, and I'll discuss that with the next slide a little more. But there are 858 within those hotspots that are within 50 feet of a water body, and another 2,277 that are further away, for a total of 3,135 septic systems within the hotspots. The city joined with FAU and Harbor Branch to do a 2-year microbial source tracking study. And here we go looking at a quilt again. We see the 5 bacterial pollution hotspots that were identified in that study. And that was the Sagamore Drainage Basin, the Elkham Drainage Basin, the Hog Pen, the Monterey, and the Veterans. And you can see there the number of septic systems. And of course, that number changes monthly as we do additional connections. So a driving question with our city council has always been, how can we increase those numbers of conversions? And the benefits must outweigh any barriers. And of course, the biggest barrier continues to be money, paying that sewer connection fee. Again, $5,800 currently. And then of course, adding to your monthly water bill and sewer bill. One solution, we worked with our city council. They did put $100,000 allocation in the city's general fund so that we could offer 50% funding to properties within those hotspots. Again, it must have been a property that was within 50 feet of a waterway within that hotspot. And it reduces the upfront connection costs down to $2,900 or $24.37 monthly for 10 years. And the first time they did that allocation was in our city fiscal year 1920. So when we got that money, the first area we started with was the Sagamore hotspot because it's the smallest. And we thought, you know, let's not jump in both feet into a giant problem, that old thing of how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Well, that's how we approached this. So in June of 2020, we mailed letters to the 62 properties that are shown on this map in purple. It may show as pink or purple on your screen. Those are the ones that are on the waterways. And in July, we sent a follow-up, having received 10 responses to the first letter, 7 more, for a total of 17 grants that we were able to award, spending $49,000 of that first 100. We could probably have done much more had we gotten an earlier start, but it took some time to develop the program and get everything set up. So we didn't get started till June, and the fiscal year, of course, ended in September. They, again, the council awarded or allocated another $100,000 to the current fiscal year. So we moved on to the Elkham hotspot. This is the Elkham waterway shown here in red, which of course discharges directly into the North Fork of the river. And there are 363 properties within that hotspot that are within 50 feet of a waterway, not necessarily just the Elkham waterway. There's 102 properties that are right along that waterway that have septic systems. We sent letters out in November and 24 properties responded. Second chance letters went out in January of this year with 5 more. So as of last week, we had awarded 29 grants using a total of $84,810. These, it was amazing, particularly the people right along this Elkham waterway, how quickly they did respond. It's almost as if they had just been waiting for a little assistance. The next focus, which actually we sent letters out 2 weeks ago to the people that are in the remaining half, so to speak, of that hotspot in the easternmost side. Again, trying to focus on those properties that are nearer to the river and would impact the river most negatively. And we're working on additional funding to be able to continue to award those grants. Grants from outside agencies have been adding to the success of our program, particularly this year, legislative appropriations. We applied last year for right around $800,000, and we were fortunate that the legislature did award us $100,000 out of that. And that money we're currently working on right now within that Elkham hotspot. We will be continuing with that program. We have recently submitted a request for $731,000 moving into the current legislative funding cycle and hoping to get that. We have been blessed with a $100,000 award from the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. We haven't signed the final documents, but hope to do that soon. Unfortunately, that money will not be available to us until October, so it'll be moving into next fiscal year. Again, trying to finish up there in the Elkham hotspot. So moving forward, of course, we're going to continue our voluntary conversion project. We will continue offering the 10-year interest-free financing, which actually does become a lien against the property. The owner has to sign a capital charge agreement. So ultimately, it does get paid. Right now, if you do sell the property or there's some other real estate transaction changing the owner's names, you can assume that ending balance and continue paying it on a monthly basis. Our neighborhood services program department, which some people used to call code enforcement or code compliance, the fancy new title is neighborhood services. They combined to use some of the CDBG and SHIP funding. And in that program, they offer 100% financing, but it goes to a limited number of owners based on income. And in fact, in the last 6 years, they have funded 48 conversions, 100%. They're looking at implementing some additional programs which would have modified income levels. Our council hasn't determined if they want to do that or not, so that's still in discussion. The city's general fund appropriations, we certainly hope that our council will continue to do that. Historically, it's been 100,000, and we believe that they will definitely continue that. We will use those monies to systematically offer the 50% grant to properties that are within the hotspot. Again, trying to focus on those that are within 50 feet of a waterway. And if there is any funding available, we would honor voluntary grant requests for those properties that are within a hotspot, but maybe not necessarily within 50 feet of the waterway. Again, that's completely contingent on funding being available. And we, of course, are going to continue to apply for any outside agency grant that we become aware of, using that same protocol as we have been with the 50% grants. And we will be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Don. We really appreciate that. Are there any questions? Chair Bailey, that's one.
I just have a quick comment. Thank you for all your foresight and your work. We know this is a really large problem affecting South Florida, and to see the work that you've done, and you put up your own funding, and you also attracted funding by putting up your own funding. And so I'm just thankful to see the innovation and just starting it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'll be sure that the City Council is aware of your comments.
Okay,
Donna, a question for you. Some of the feedback that you're getting from folks who, you've invited in the program and they say no, do you think, or how much better would the yes rate be if it was 100%, do you think? Is the $2,500 what's deferring them, or is it that they don't want to be on central sewer, they don't want to pay a monthly bill, they just don't want it? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I've been working with the water and sewer program since it began here at the city, and I have yet to encounter anyone who wanted to connect for environmental reasons. That's a shame.
Yeah.
But the bulk of our connections come from either those properties where their septic system has failed and the St. Lucie County Health Department has mandated that they connect, or they're in the process of either refinancing or selling a home. Most of the, or I think all of the mortgages that are now federally funded do require that they connect to a city sewer system or a public sewer system if available. So if it became 100%, we might increase our numbers to some degree, but there are many people that don't even open the envelope. They don't, they see the city of Port St. Lucie and they just ignore it, or they don't want to look at their monthly water bill going up, because it does go up, for the value or the usage of the sewer.
Sure.
Based on their meter reading.
Sure. Okay. No, thank you. That's interesting, and that's a new piece of information I hadn't heard before, as far as mortgage holders looking to kind of force that issue.
Right.
That certainly that'll get you a certain amount of connections just from the churn that typically happens on home sales.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, the chart that I showed early on this one slide, there was a large spike back in 2004 and 2005 in our numbers. We went up into the 600 and 700 numbers for those years. And that was, first of all, the hurricanes came those 2 years, and people's septics failed because of all the extra rainfall those years. But also that was the beginning of the real estate boom, and homes were being sold like crazy. So there were a lot of those due to mortgage requirements.
And if Donna, thank you for that. Yeah, that's interesting. And then a follow-up question: in a neighborhood with platted lots that's vacant, and there is a sewer pipe in the street, and I come in and get a building permit for a new house, do I have to connect?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You cannot get a permit from the health department for a new septic system.
Okay, and if there's no pipe in the street, then I can build a septic tank for my house?
That is correct. There are about 100 properties here in the city that do not have a sewer line available to them. Unfortunately, one of those is right along the river. Vikings Lookout does not have sewer available, and those homes do back up right to the river.
Any other questions or comments?
I see a hand. Yep. Somebody's waving. Hi.
Hi, this is Mayor Geller. Quick question. I know that the state has discussed at various times putting funds aside for septic to sewer conversion. Are you aware of any current programs that they've actually funded? And if so, are they apply in general in the urban areas or only in certain very limited circumstances? The reason I'm asking is we have in Broward one substantial city and some other patches that still are on septic, and we want to do everything we can to get them onto sewer.
Well, we have applied through the legislative request process and received FDEP funding. So that's one process, but of the $800,000 that we requested, we only received 100.
Well, I was in the legislature for 20 years. That's going through an individual legislative request. But at one point in time, or actually several times, I know the legislature has discussed specifically setting aside dollars specifically just for septic to sewer. I just wanted to know when you were looking, if you're aware of any.
I'm not aware of any current program to that extent. Again, we stumbled upon that National Estuary Grant. One of the gals in our city manager's office, Kate Parmerly, who some of you may know, stumbled upon that grant, and we applied, and sure enough, we got another $100,000. But to find any large chunks of money, the only thing I have seen relative to grants has not been for the conversion process so much as it has been to actually install the infrastructure.
Thank you.
And of course, that's not what we need at this point.
We did get a comment in the chat from Bill Eggers, who said that my insurance company recently required me to re-roof my house because it was more than 20 years old. I've been in that boat. Do you think that that could be a driver for this program? Yeah, I guess our insurance company's picking up septic as a something they're worried about.
Well, I'm in that same boat. In fact, I'm under contract to get a new roof because mine was replaced after the 04-05 hurricanes. And my insurer didn't want to insure a 15-year-old roof. So I just recently refinanced. Had I not already been connected to city sewer, it's very possible I would have been required to connect to city sewer as part of that refinancing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think the roofers and the insurance companies are in together. I hadn't given thoughts about the septic, but that's a good point. We may see an uptick. On my street alone, there's 2 houses already that are getting new roofs, and I'm going to be the 3rd one. We all had blue roofs back after the hurricanes.
Yeah, that was in fashion for a while. So I don't believe we have any more questions or comments. I would thank you very much for your presentation. And obviously, we talked about the growth that we were experiencing at almost 1,000 new Floridians a day before the pandemic. Certainly this demand coming forward may be part of the solution. As indirect as it may be, we'll take any bright spot in this challenging situation for sure. So thank you very much, Donna, for that.
You are very welcome.
All right, next on the agenda would be a legislative update by one of our executive directors. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Lanahan first.
Actually, Isabel's going to take the first topic. So we have the first 4 things on your list here are the topical areas that we did joint resolutions on at our last meeting. So Isabel with coral reefs.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you so much. If you turn to your agenda item number 9, you will see a more expansive description of what I'm going to briefly go over, particularly given the late hour that we're in. So I will start with coral reefs. And as I do, I just want to make sure to thank Joanna Walzak and her team at DEP, Tom Reiner at the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, Kathy Fitzpatrick, and other partners that are part of our coral task force that is led by Commissioner Furr and Commissioner Smith, making it truly a 7-county initiative. And also I'd like to thank Greg Burns, who's our federal lobbyist for Martin County that provides quite a few updates on what's going on in Washington. So just a few quick points. The governor's Florida Leads budget has significant dollars for water resource and specifically includes $10 million for the Resilient Coastlines program, which also can be used for coral reef health, including restoration and monitoring. So that's good. We had funding last year and now we have it again, which is very good. On federal legislation, the legislation to keep an eye on is the Restoring Resilient Reef Act of 2021. This is House Resolution 160 and Senate Bill 46. This represents a compromise bill. Last year there were 2 reef bills. They were competing. This is a compromise piece of legislation, and it will address conservation, sustainability of coral reef ecosystems and assist with funding. But it's very important to make sure that we get everybody on board. So right now, 21 members of the Florida delegation have not signed on to the legislation. So I would ask all of you to, and again, the meeting package has more detailed information, and I'm sure your legislative staff can get you more, or Tom and I can. But we need to encourage all our legislators to sign on to this legislation and to move it forward because As you know, the disease has been very bad, and we don't have time to be lagging behind on our efforts to address the disease and restore the reef. On state legislation, I have good news. You may recall that the boards voted at our last meeting in October to pursue the renaming of the Southeast Florida Coral Reef Ecosystem Conservation Area after Representative Christian Jacobs, who was the champion who had passed the conservation area legislation. I'm happy to report that legislation was filed this year, Senate Bill 588 by Senator Book and House Bill 217 by Representative Honchofsky of Broward and Representative Overdorf. And that legislation, House Bill 217, passed yesterday, the House unanimously, 119-0, and is on its way to the Senate, where the Senate bill is waiting for it. A Senate bill is now in Senate Appropriations, ready to be heard. And the final point of the resolution related to the coral reefs was that the boards instructed council staff to work with its chairs to send a request to Secretary Valenstein of DEP and Executive Director Sutton of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to ask them to please put as a priority action item a joint effort by both organizations to take the lead in the creation of a long-term conservation strategy for Florida's coral reefs. A letter to this was sent in December of last year. Receipt was acknowledged, and now we're awaiting a reply. So with that, that concludes my coral reef brief update. And again, additional information is in your package.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Isabel. And I'll take the next two. So we have the water and wastewater infrastructure. And again, there's extensive information in your agenda packet. First, I want to thank our good friend Frank Bernardino of Infield Consulting for assistance in developing this part of the update. As you know, he's spoken with us, presented a couple of times at our meetings, and is always full of good information about these issues. And then also thank Mayor Keller and Broward County legislative staff for their Water Advisory Board slide deck that's in the package. In January, State Economic and Demographic Research Office released their 2021 assessment of water resource needs. And this is a piece of bad news. The needs have grown to $840 million a year. It's an increase over the prior year forecast of $577 million, and then only $383 million back in 2019. So we're not keeping up with that. And then directly in response to the Regional Planning Council requests, there's been conversations with the Senate President's Office and the House Speaker about commissioning a study to accomplish the goals that we outlined in that joint resolution. And it does seem like they would be supportive of that. The goals revolved around, really identifying what the needs are and how to have a consistent, planned, multi-year funding program to get those addressed. And then the House of Representatives has proposed an expansion to EDR's annual assessment to include short and long-term flooding and sea level rise. So that would be a new feature to that analysis, and would probably make the backlog number higher, I'm going to guess. And then in the governor's proposed budget, there's quite a bit of funding for water-related things. $300 million for Everglades restoration, $150 million for targeted water quality improvements, $50 million towards protecting our springs, $25 million in water quality improvements and combating harmful algae blooms, and $40 million for alternative water supply development. And that, by looking at multi-year funding requests that he has been proposing, $625 million a year, that would be $2.5 billion invested by the end of his first term in office, which is over $1 billion more than invested in the prior 4 years. So that is extraordinarily significant. And then the last feature to mention in his proposed budget is transferring 19 positions from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to DEP, which would allow them to, brings in the Environmental Crimes Enforcement Unit, and they would have investigations and criminal enforcement in DEP and not just civil enforcement. And so sometimes that's a way to help bring attention to an issue that doesn't always get as much attention. A badge and a gun can be a little more persuasive than just an embroidered shirt sometimes. So then we've got, moving on to the biosolids item. The highlights there, brief history note, is June 8 of 2018 that we convened our biosolids symposium. And then shortly thereafter, FDEP formed a biosolids technical advisory committee on which we participated. They met through September 2018 to January 2019, had extensive deliberation, clearly identified that the existing regulations are not accomplishing the goals of the regulations in protecting the water from nutrients. So they moved into proposed rule changes. They moved that process along through 2019. However, they withdrew the rules because Senate Bill 712, the Clean Waterways Act, was adopted, which covered a lot of the same territory. And so I don't look at that as a negative. That's actually a positive, that that process got issues on the agenda, on the radar for the legislature. They took it up, put some new law in place. So then FDEP went into rulemaking on the basis of the new statutes. And that has been proceeding. They published the proposed amendments in December of 2020. And then this March 1st, they announced the date for their meeting, which is on May 27th, as a public meeting to take comment on those proposed rules. The register information is in the backup material. I highly suggest, if you're interested in this issue, please sign up for that, get on board, and be able to participate in that. And then the other thing related to biosolids, I mentioned the Clean Waterways Act of 2020, Senate Bill 712. And that was Senator Debbie Mayfield and Representative Bobby Payne who led the charge on that with broad bipartisan support. Some key features, regulating septic tanks as a source of nutrients, transferred those to DEP rather than Department of Health. Different agency focus, which will yield better results on the nutrient issue. Requirements for contingency plans for power outages at wastewater treatment plants to minimize discharges. Provision of financial records from sanitary sewer disposal facilities so that DEP can make sure there's enough being spent on maintenance. Requirements for detailed documentation of fertilizer used by agricultural operations to ensure compliance with best management practices. And this has a nexus to the biosolids issue because one of the types of biosolids treatment categories becomes labeled as fertilizer and was sort of slipping out of regulation at that point. So this actually brings some of that back in. And then requirements to update the stormwater management rules to improve performance on nutrient management, which I think also is related. So that's the biosolids issue update.
Thank you, John. Isabel.
Yes, Chair. So that leaves the affordable housing update. Again, I refer you to your meeting package because there's a lot of information there regarding legislation that's being considered. And I'd like to attribute that and thank the Sadowski Coalition, the Florida Housing Coalition, for that information that was taken from their webinar. So the good news, as you recall, at our last meeting, what we requested was that we wanted full appropriation of the funds in the Sadowski Trust Funds from last year that were not distributed, and this year. So, and that is what the governor's budget represents, as Executive Director Eagle said. They're recommending full funding of those trust funds. And of course, we just need to make sure that we are working with our legislators in Tallahassee to make sure that they appropriate the full funding. And you will see also that there is some legislation in Tallahassee, Senate Bill 510 by Senator Hooper and House Bill 13 by Representatives Kilbrew and Silvers, that would protect the trust funds going forward to prevent them from being swept into general revenue. The Sadowski Coalition also provided some helpful information about the American Rescue Plan Act, and they provided a housing funding summary. I know that you as elected leaders, many of you have had to deal with a lot of stress in your community and housing needs. So this fund, the summary that they provided, it says there's 27 billion more for emergency rental assistance, in addition to 25 billion passed in December. There's, well, you can see the list, 21 billion through the Coronavirus Relief Fund, 5 billion for housing vouchers, 100 million for rural households, homelessness assistance, there's foreclosure assistance, and money also for utility assistance, as well as some money for housing counseling and fair housing. So it seems that there will be resources to work with. Sufficient, who knows, but at least there's some there to work with. And with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have. Oh, and let me mention that for your information, let me point out that the projected SHIP document for this year for 21-22, you can look at this, it's in your meeting package, and it will tell you what the SHIP estimates are for your jurisdictions.
And can you say when these funds will be available?
Well, it's actually a two-part thing. It says here that, I don't know, because I heard it was in the webinar, and I provided a link to the webinar so you could hear it. Some of the funds will be available after the budget is completed, but it did say here in the webinar, it says, while the housing funds are already in the budget and ready to be released, the full appropriation for the two programs will not be transferred until 2022. So I'm not exactly sure what that means exactly, but typically the money is appropriated and it's released. So again, we're dealing with 2 fiscal years, and I'm not exactly sure what the answer to that is, but it's in the webinar.
Sure, Mr. Chair, I want to take a moment, if possible, personal privilege to quickly recognize our former member who we're so proud of, Mayor Daniela Levine-Cava, who joined us.
Well, thank you, Chair Bailey. A pleasure to call you that, and also to the Honorable Jeff Hamara, who is Chair of Treasure Coast. So these were the meetings that we look forward to so much, the mega region, and so grateful to join you for just a couple of minutes here. I do have nostalgia for my role at the South Florida Regional Planning Council, where I served for many happy years. Thank you so much, Isabel.
You're welcome, Mayor.
Yeah. So I did want to also say that we are celebrating the successful collaboration of the regional planning councils. That was an effort that started almost 8 years ago. The preparation of the 750 plan, which I also participated in, supported by US HUD, EPA, and DOT. And all 7 counties are here today, providing a framework for many of the issues that you have been discussing. So again, I'm sad not to be able to listen in and participate actively, but we are a region. We must behave as one and be responsible for the resources of the region. I just got off a call with our Dade delegation, some of the delegation members also representing Broward. You know, I'm always reminded that what happens with our water, with our transportation, with our education, with our economy, we're all mutually interdependent. So we did recently launch a sea level rise strategy in Miami-Dade County with the leadership of our Chief Resilience Officer, Jim Murley. And it clearly demonstrates that, you know, the water does flow and whether it's in the ocean or the freshwater areas and the Everglades. So these federal water projects particularly affect all of us, and we need to continue to advocate together to protect our vulnerable environment. And I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Jennifer Jurado, our Chief Resilience Officer for Broward as well, for your leadership on the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact. This is, as you all know, an exemplar for the nation, if not the world, and is often touted as the best example of working together for the health of the region. And of course, we're looking at the Central and Southern Florida Flood Project. So we have immediate issues that we're all working on. We did not get funding for the restudy this year, which is a great disappointment, but I'm going to double down with the other county mayors to ensure funding is approved going forward. So mayors, let's talk. And sea level is continuing to rise no matter what happens with the debate or the funding. So, you know, nature doesn't lie. So in Miami-Dade County, we definitely share the regional interest and need to reduce pollution from septic tanks, which is our current priority, that's ending up in our bays and estuaries. And I did recently appoint our Chief Bay Officer, Irela Bagay, well known, I'm sure, to most of you. She's known also as the Water Princess. And our commission is working also with the support of the state legislature to create a Biscayne Bay Watershed Management Advisory Board. And one of the major focuses of this initiative is the conversion of our most vulnerable septic tanks, which we have mapped out, the ones that become inoperable with rising seas, king tides, flooding, and so on. And we are going to be connecting more of our residents to countywide sewer. Just was done in Monroe County, so very proud of the work of Monroe paving the way. So we're hopeful that not only state will support these efforts, but under the American Rescue Plan, there'll be a good tranche of federal funding to assist us with that. So we are lobbying actively in Tallahassee and in Washington. Our mega region is 6 million people plus. I think you all are aware of that. We're larger than 30 states in this country. So we are a recognized leader on many of these issues, and we need to get our fair share of the funding from the state and federal government. So that's a little overview of where we are prioritizing our energy and mine. And I'm really, really proud to serve for 4 months so far as Mayor of Miami to move the agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. We really appreciate that.
Let's get into the IPE.
So, in order to continue with our joint meetings and other activities as regional planning councils, we had and still have Senate Bill 62 to continue to be aware of its progress. It was passed by the Community Affairs Committee of the Senate, but has not advanced to the next committee of reference. And there is no House companion bill and no movement currently, all of which sounds very good, but we need to recognize that we're only about a third of the way through the session. Our contacts and our opposition resolutions are getting the word out, and they seem to be having an effect, a very favorable one for RPCs. I want to particularly thank Senator Janet Cruz, Senator Tina Polsky, and Senator Bobby Powell for the early support of the regional planning councils. I want to thank you, Commissioner O'Brien, Commissioner Smith, Chair Bailey, for going to Tallahassee to testify to the Senate Community Affairs Committee. Thanks to others who have testified, Julie Dennis, Abovit Solutions, Courtney Barker, Satellite Beach City Manager, Mindy Gibson, Satellite Beach City Council Member, Chairman Jimmy Anderson of the Baker County Commission, and Carl Vikiska of MPOC, Tom Lewis of Terracon Consultants, and Vivian Young of Thousand Friends of Florida. And thank you to everyone who has contacted their senators and representatives and those who have passed resolutions supporting regional planning councils. It is appreciated and apparently effective. So by all means, let's keep an eye and stay vigilant on that activity. So with that said, we now can open up for public comment.
If you could just indicate in the chat if any member of the public would like to speak, and we'll recognize you. Or pop on your camera and your microphone and we'll see you pop up. Okay, well, I don't see any coming in. Okay, we can move on if you'd like.
Okay, not seeing any public comments, and we'll move on to council comment. And turn to my fellow chair, Chair Bailey, and invite him to poll his members.
Sure, thank you. Do we have any members from the South Florida Regional Planning Council that wish to speak at this moment about just today or going forward? Seeing none, I'm turning back over to Chair Hamar.
Thank you. And so likewise to Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council members, is there anyone who wishes to offer a comment, observation?
Jeff, if I could just add my thanks for previous joint meetings where I was able to meet Peter Janicki, which is the gentleman who's worked on biosolids issues. And since then, we've continued our conversation and still looking for ways to deal with particularly the manure issue that Palm Beach County and the equine industry has. So thank you for that. I know we were kind of obnoxious where we were talking to each other during the meeting, but hopefully it'll be worth it because we continue to have those conversations looking for real solutions that are environmentally responsible. And also the thing about him, he really has the economics in mind, so that if it's economically feasible, it brings it forward and it can be a lasting solution. So thank you for that opportunity a couple years ago.
Funny comment. It's nice to see enthusiasm about waste treatment, right?
Are there any other comments from members of Treasure Coast?
Yeah, Honeyman is.
Hi. Just as a point of information, in Vero Beach, we sent a letter of support for the Regional Planning Council to Representative Grohl and Senator Mayfield, opposing any bill that looks to eliminate the regional planning councils. I also appreciate the information that was given today about the efforts with the discharges coming from Lake Okeechobee over into the St. Lucie. You know, that's been a huge source of nutrient pollution in our lagoon. So it's very encouraging to have that information. I'm sure people are going to be very happy to hear it. We have a successful STEP system in our city with mandatory septic inspections. If they fail, they're required to hook up. Mostly everything has been voluntary to this point. We keep reviewing the system. We're going to be updating it. Our discussion is going to be updating it soon. And excuse me, we are very actively pursuing any kind of illegal dumping from vessels in the Indian River Lagoon. That's been a big problem, and we have very active cleansing on that issue. So I'll keep you all updated. Thank you. This was an excellent meeting. A lot of good information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Moss.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry I disappeared for a brief period of time earlier. We had some technical difficulties here. We have brand new equipment. I'm back on my old equipment, so I don't even know if my name's on the screen, but thank you. I especially wanted to offer my thanks for the information on the affordable housing section and the Sadowski Trust Fund. Been working on that for years as part of Vero Beach City Council. So I hope this will be a year where we can see some change. And you know, we plan to work very seriously on that here. So thank you for this and for spending a little time on it.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. That's any other comments? Okay, not seeing any. Let me just ask if Chair Belly has any closing comments that he'd like to make.
No, just really quick, I just want to thank staff. This has been an excellent meeting. Great information that we can pass along. So thank you for working on putting this together and identifying great speakers. So just thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Belly. And thank you, Isabel.
Yes, thank you, Isabel.
Welcome, chairs. Thank you.
And there are certainly good reasons to be excited about seeing the continuance of regional planning council. Just look at what's been done today. It is evidence of the value, no doubt about it. And as Mayor Cava said, in paraphrasing what she said, we are all in this together, no doubt about it, in the region. And so once again, thank you all for attending, and thank you presenters for great presentations, and you all have a safe and enjoyable weekend. Thank you. And by the way, the next meeting is Friday, October the 15th. That would be the next joint meeting. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you.